Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Super Series Round 10 action coming to you with our broadcast partners Short Shift Podcast and Apex Rear Wing TV. We're here at Silverstone tonight running the Formula 3 layout of the circuit, and this will be our first Super Series race with a champion-elect. Brenton Hobson sealed the title last week, and having said that, there's still plenty of accolades left to crown, so it certainly doesn't mean that there's nothing to race for tonight. My name's Stairs, and joining me in the commentary box once again tonight, as always, for the Super Series, apart from last week, is Nether.
Good evening, Stairs. Good evening, viewers. Welcome to Silverstone.
It's good to be here. We're going to have a quick look at the point situation, because as I mentioned just a moment ago, Brenton Hobson wrapped it up last week. He has a commanding lead over Lewis Wedding, and with only 80 points left on the board, 100 points left on the board, Lewis Wedding can do nothing about that, but Will Devenish has Johnny for company in the Pro B, just 2 points separating those guys, and I believe you've got the points in front of you there, Nether, for the rest of the top 10.
Yeah, I do. As you already mentioned, Brenton Hobson summing up the title last round. He can't be beaten. He's miles clear on top, with Wedding second. But you're right. We've got Devenish and Johnny who are battling it out. Actually, Pro B runners battling it out at the moment for a net third place. Aidan Schultz is not out of that equation by any means. Neither is Brock Harvey or Matt Williams, and they're 5th, 6th, and 7th in a very tight pack of cars. So those positions could change hands very, very quickly depending on the results tonight. A bit further back for the remainder of the top 10, you've got Lee Sanford, Dwayne Davies and Cracker. Now, they're all Pro B runners, and they're only separated by 15 points as well. So a couple of points either way, and they could change hands as well. And there's a few guys that are outside the top 10 that we haven't seen for a little while. Corey Ott's obviously been missing, Aaron Thomas as well, and Heath Dixon. They're not too far away either, so if they turn up in the next couple of rounds, they could steal a few points and sneak into the top 10.
Well, that's right. There are a lot of points left on the board. As I mentioned before, it was 80 points, I beg your pardon, not 100 remaining. So, you know, if someone wins all 4 of those races, they could find themselves well up that leaderboard into the top 10. And also interesting to note is the number of Pro B runners who are in that top 10. Just 3 Pro A runners, showing just how important consistency is in this series.
Yeah, certainly is, and we've had a couple of the Pro-Am runners in recent weeks promoted into Pro B. One of those is Brenton Foley, who's been doing quite nicely. He's actually up in the top 6 at the moment in practice, so showing, again, just pointed out how good consistency is. If you can get a good run on with some of your race results and you find your rhythm very quick, you get promoted rather soon, and then you're up mixing it with the higher ranks.
Well, that's exactly right. We saw Philip Boak and Brenton Foley were promoted from Pro-Am into the Pro B category, and just incidentally on the Pro-Am points, Luke incidentally leading that championship on 133 points, having only finished 3rd for his best result, but he's done that a number of times, which means
5 times.
He's done that 5 times, which means he's I think 17 points clear of David Keane, who's 2nd in Pro-Am. He got his first win last time out at Imola, and he'll be looking to chase down Luke's total.
Yeah, he certainly will. It's an interesting looking leaderboard with the Pro-Am class as well. As you said, Philip Boak was a net 3rd in that class until he was promoted by virtue of some of the great work he was doing. He had 5 wins from 6 race starts on the board before he was promoted. And now with him moving over to Pro B, it's really going to be down to the likes of Luke, David Keane and Brendan Ross are the guys that are battling it out for that Pro-Am title.
That's exactly right. Well, with that in mind, let's just take a quick look at the action for tonight, what we've got in store for us. As we mentioned before, we're at the Silverstone F3 circuit, so not a layout of this circuit that many are as familiar with as they are the full Grand Prix circuit, but it's a 3.651 kilometre circuit clockwise in direction, and that means we'll have 2 18-lap races for a distance of 65.714 kilometres per race. Imperative that you get the racing line correct around here, because we've had a few of the drivers couple of the Brentons mentioning to me during the course of the day that Foley and Hobson, for those playing at home, that track cuts will be a distinct possibility here, and watch out for penalties potentially being given out because it is very easy to cut the track here, they say.
Yeah, we did see a few incidents when we ran this back in the was round 2 of the Formula 3 series, which Lewis Wedding had a very, very great weekend with both race wins. He utterly dominated that. But one thing that we did pick up from that particular round of F3 was it was very difficult to affect the passing move here. You were reliant on somebody to make a mistake or to have a little moment and then capitalise on that particular mistake. Also, there were a few issues with track cuts, particularly down at the turns 5 and 6 through the back chicane, which is where the circuit breaks away from the traditional Grand Prix circuit.
Well, yes, and that matches up with what Brenton Hobson was telling us, that it will be particularly easy to block the pass, considering it's sort of a one line sort of racetrack, and very much the biggest braking zones on this circuit are into curves, which just makes it much easier from the perspective of the car ahead to defend. Yeah,
when we did run this with the F3, the prime passing opportunities were down into the hairpin at turn 7, and if you had a decent run out of the final couple of turns down into turn number 1. But like I said, we didn't see very many happen there. We only saw about 2 or 3 for the whole entire night. It was almost pretty much everyone being line astern and trying to force everybody else into mistakes for the majority of the night.
That's right, and well, mistakes, another factor will be tyre wear tonight, given that there's a lot of very quick corners. One example being the one that we're looking at Lewis Wedding going through right now, turn 1, Cops Corner, is one where the front left cops are punishing, and many of the acceleration zones being in particularly sort of curved corners, which will be very tough on those tyres, and if those tyre temperatures get up, mistakes will be more likely to occur.
Yeah, especially that left-hand side stairs, because the majority of the turns on this circuit, as you mentioned before, it's a clockwise circuit, therefore the left-hand side of the car cops quite a heavy pounding. You mentioned Cops Corner. Cops is the fastest corner on the circuit, and very, very heavy loading through that left-hand side of the car. What we're looking at on the map here, there's at least, out of 12 turns, there's, close enough to 8 or 9 of them being left-hand bends.
But this is the section we're talking about, as we see Lewis Wedding just jumping out of the way of Brenton Hobson there and going over our curb camera. That section that where the circuit breaks off from the GP circuit at Maggots, it cuts off before it gets to Beckett's and does a hard right, and there are some very high curbs and a single file line through that section of the track.
Yeah, that's definitely a single file section. We saw a few guys in the Formula 3 come unstuck there with a little bit of untidy attempts at passing through that chicane, but it's very much a single file through that little section there. Much as where it is through a single file section through the section under the bridge and coming back into the stadium complex as well. That's almost you'd be very brave to try and affect the pass through there. Absolutely.
The man you're looking at there, Lewis Wedding, a 1:20.9. He is the fastest person in this practice session so far. Brenton Hobson says that he can do a lap time similar to that on full fuel. So once again, we are looking at these two as our potential men to fight it out for the victory. But a couple of familiar faces, a couple of new faces. Johnny's up there as always, and he's looking to overhaul, as we mentioned before, Will Devenish for first place in Pro B. Will Devenish down there in 12th. But A. Simpson on your screen there, down in 3rd place. Standing for Andy, incidentally. No relation to the other Andy, since first names are not an indicator of being a relative. But Andy Simpson, a newcomer, and straight on the pace, only 2/10 off what Wedding can do at the moment.
Yeah, he's actually just gone top there, Stairs, as well, but not by very much.
As I said that, yes.
Yeah, just as we were talking, by 0.017, so obviously this possibly is a low fuel run, given qualifying's less than 2.5 minutes away.
Well, we're seeing these Hollywood runs that, as as Brock Harvey likes to call them, they tend to come out towards the end of the practice session, and people start, they start driving for a little bit of pride. Maybe not necessarily a race run, but a rehearsal of how they're going to do their qualifying.
Yeah, getting themselves familiar with what the car feels like on a light fuel load. And most of the time, the guys will be practicing with the heavy fuel load because they want to see how it reacts when it burns off. Because just remember, there's no compulsory stops for tyres or fuel in this series, unlike GT3, where we have to stop, you're forced to stop, and where you've got the supercar series where you're forced to stop for one compulsory one as well. You've got to manage your tyres and manage your fuel appropriately in this category.
Is it actually a compulsory stop in GT3, or is it just because the race is so long it's not physically possible to do it without one stop, without at least one stop?
Yeah, we had the debate about this on the broadcast on the weekend. It's definitely not a compulsory stop. You have to stop regardless, given the distance of the race. But it's just a matter of how the cards fall, where the safety cars come out, whether or not you make it 1 or 2 stops. I mean, we saw some people trying to get it done on a 1 in races past, but unfortunately falling short.
Well, yeah, it's definitely possible if there are enough safety car laps. On Sunday at Sebring, I don't think anyone managed to make 1 stop work, as we only had 2 safety cars, and the last one wasn't until much later in the race when everyone had already committed to their pit strategies. But no pit stops at all tonight, unless they're significantly unplanned, I would think. You're obviously still allowed to come into the pits if you need to because of damage or any other reasons, punctures, well, I guess punctures would come under the bracket of damage, but the point being, you wouldn't really pit for a strategic reason, unless maybe you were at the back anyway and there was a late race safety car.
No, that's correct. The majority of the time the guys come into the pits, it's either for serving a penalty or pitting for damage and repairs. And it hasn't happened, I don't want to put the moz on anybody. It hasn't happened very often in recent weeks, but it has happened in the past, where guys get picked up for speeding through the pit lane if they're coming in to repair damage, and then they only end up having to do another tour of the pit lane anyway, just further comprehends or compounds their bad night or their bad race if that ends up happening. But they've been behaving themselves recently.
Yes, I think and he'll hate me for bringing this up, but Brenton Foley was probably the example of that a few rounds ago at the GT race at Suzuka, where he was running quite well actually, and then picked up a penalty when he made his pit stop, and then I think picked up at least twice more another drive-through for speeding while serving his aforementioned drive-through. So, and I think that came down to some dramas with his wheel or something like that. He was having some issues with force feedback, and I guess once you've done that 2 or 3 times, it's very easy to mistrust your equipment.
That's right.
But as we say that, the circuit's gone quiet because the practice session has come to an end, and we're about to begin qualifying.
Yes, we are. 15 minutes on the clock for qualifying for race number 1 of the penultimate round. We should point out we've only got 1 more round of 2 races after tonight's proceedings, Stairs, before the end of the season.
We're giddy for that one. We are giddy for that one because that's Bathurst.
Yeah, yes, and we do expect a rather large turnout, I guess, from the Australian community. With kind of well known that once Bathurst comes out, everyone seems to come out of the woodwork and wants to race it.
Yes, probably much to the chagrin of some of the top guys here who themselves would like to win it, but I don't know, we might see some of these aliens from iRacing who came in and dominated for 1 or 2 races and then disappeared. Yep. But we're starting to get, I think Will Devenish is at the head of the queue, and a few more cars, Brenton Hobson and Brenton Foley, line astern behind him, just waiting for the light to go green and get this qualifying session underway. As Brenton Hobson said, a very important qualifying session, because when overtaking is difficult, qualifying becomes all the more important.
That's it. And you're right, Devenish out, followed by Hobson and Foley, and now we've seen Schultz and Brendan Ross coming out. They fired the engine for the Matt Williams entry, but he hasn't made it out onto the pit road just yet. But they're slowly filtering their way out.
Yeah,
here we go. 4
cars so far, I believe, onto the circuit. Aidan Schultz is following Brendan Ross, Matt Williams, and they don't come out as much in a in a big snake like they did earlier on in the season. I know Brenton Foley was keen to get onto the track fairly early on his qualifying session. It's one thing to say that, you know, you'll avoid the traffic if you don't go onto the track straight away, but if everyone has that same idea, then you might have missed your opportunity if you don't get a lap in early. And if you don't get a lap in early, then you don't. The thing is, you give yourself the opportunity, if you have an early lap, to come in and have a later lap.
That's right. We've had these issues at some of the smaller circuits with regards to track space, likes of Winton, for example, where space is at a bit of a premium, and people just have to be a little bit patient. But this circuit's not too bad.
Has to be said,
plenty of room.
Brenton Hobson has not given much room ahead of him to Will Devenish, so it'll be interesting to see whether Hobbo catches Devenish on this lap. But we'll go on board with Will Devenish as he goes through Copse, and probably could have taken a bit more speed through Copse there as he heads down towards Maggots and Beckett's. But he won't be going through Maggots and Beckett's because he's going to, well, he goes through the first part of Maggots, but he's going to turn right here and second gear corner through into this single file section that we mentioned. Very easy to pick up a track cut through some of these corners, and down to join the other part of the Grand Prix version of the circuit. Another tight corner here. This is one of the potential overtaking opportunities. Will taking that one in second gear up on the curb, and rejoining the old Grand Prix circuit as we head under the bridge through Bridge Corner, circuit that I think a part of the circuit that I think many of us miss quite a bit, and taking third gear through left-hander into the last few corners of the circuit, second, and these are the corners that really are quite taxing on the front tyres. A little bit of a change in the asphalt there, which is possibly going to unsettle some of the cars, especially later in the race when they're becoming a little bit worn out. But 1:22.8, that's the first benchmark set, and it looks like there was a mistake for Hobson. He either backed out of it significantly or made a mistake, because he's behind Brenton Foley on track there, is Brenton Hobson, and 5 seconds down, so obviously he's either backed out of that lap or had an error.
Yeah, I think it might have been a small error from Hobson, because he was right under the rear wing of Will Devenish as they come through Bridge Corner, and then a couple of seconds later he dropped right back. I think he probably was a bit too close for comfort and had a bit of a moment, and then decided to abandon the lap. But we know Hobson's got some more time in him, and there's no doubt in that. Well, the times
are coming in thick and fast now. Andy Simpson has gone to the top of the tree with a 1:21.5, and Will Devenish was significantly up through the first sector on his first lap, so he looks like he's going to improve. Cameron's there in second, Schultz in third, and Foley in fourth, and Devenish 6/10 up on his best, just half a tenth away from Simpson's time.
Yeah, not far away at all. You were talking about these couple of corners here, Stairs. As much as they load up those outside tyres when you go through them, they're very patient corners as well. They seem to go on forever, and you're very, very tempted to get on the throttle, but you have to just hold your nerve and wait till the car gets to exactly the right point on the track before you accelerate away, as otherwise you'll cause yourself to understeer or lose control of that car. And these cars will punish you for that. If you're impatient and you give it a little bit too much beans, they'll swap on ends on you. You have a tank slapper that'll be very difficult to recover from. Absolutely. Number of guys on the circuit at the moment setting some very, very nice lap times. Brenton Foley had set himself a good time. Johnny's looking very, very nice as well. Cameron's up there setting some decent times. Sorry to cut across you there. Johnny goes top there, 1.5 tenths ahead of Andy Simpson. So we saw he was setting purple sectors, and he matched what a lot of the other guys are doing in the final sector, so there may well be more pace in it. But a 21.3 is the early benchmark for Johnny. Here comes Wedding, Stairs. He's gone up to second, not very, very close to Johnny's time, so just slots in between Johnny and Andy Simpson. Yeah, I think you saw he's got more pace in him than that. He did a sub 20 in practice, so that's just a sighter for Lewis Wedding. Yeah, it certainly is. We saw he was right up there mixing with the best. We expected the
here we go. He's up again.
We're going to get into the sub 21s quite comfortably.
Well, Lewis has taken 2 tenths out of his previous lap, through the first sector, and given it's a short lap, 2/10 is a significant margin, and if he continues at that sort of rate, he will easily get into the 20s. Speaking of, Brenton Hobson well, he's done a 21.2, still not the best that he's capable of, but he goes to a provisional pole as we speak. But Lewis Wedding on a charge, he's half a second up on his PB.
Yeah, he's muscling this car around quite quickly. Just coincidentally for the viewers at home, if you're not watching the live timing, the best lap of the weekend so far was Andy Simpson's last lap or best lap in practice just gone of a 120.919.
And incidentally, he's sorry to cut across you, Andy Simpson's just gone second, only 700ths off Brenton Hobson, but Lewis Wedding goes top 6/10 faster, a 20.6. That is quick.
That is very quick, and that is the quickest time of the race weekend so far. But we're not over. We're not done with yet, Stairs. We've still got plenty of time to go, and the times are still coming, and very, very quickly.
Well, Andy Simpson lost a lot of time to Lewis Wedding in the final sector. He was faster than Lewis Wedding in the first sector. I think matched him there was probably about a 10th difference in the second sector. But in the third sector, that was where all the time was. That's where the 6/10ths were.
Yeah, he made it. He made it very, very, looked very, very impressive, didn't he, Lewis Wedding? He just absolutely sublime. He knows that second's the best that he can hope for in the championship, and he wants to do everything in his power to put it beyond reach.
Yeah, he's probably a bit annoyed at the way the GT3s went on the weekend on Sunday. He had a disconnection and didn't lose his championship lead, but well, he lost a fair chunk of it, and he's tied on points in that series with Greg Nangle when he was quite comfortable going for 4 on the trot, but the balance of performance not going his way, and then compounded by not finishing. Incidentally, just one man in the pits at the moment, and that's Aidan Schultz. Everyone else out on the circuit.
Yes, it's a busy circuit at the moment. It seems to be the rush hour time or rush hour part of the qualifying session where everybody's out there trying to go. As Brendan Ross saved it very, very nicely coming out of Maggot's corner as Johnny abandons his next attempt. Have a line of stern on circuit. Andy Simpson actually, Stairs, is finding a little bit of time, but just in increments.
Hobson just spun coming out of the Maggot's hairpin there, and just in front of Lewis Wedding, who's half a 10th off in the first sector, and people going off all over the place. Philip Boak looks like he had a bit of a mistake there, so Lewis Wedding dodging an obstacle course around this circuit to get this lap in.
Yes, the peak hour part of qualifying is often the most treacherous for the people who want to get out and set their lap times in this particular part of qualifying, because you're always going to come across some slower cars that you don't want them to be there on your quick lap. And this is the point in time where some drivers opt to just park it in the garage for a couple of minutes and just wait until the track clears and then try and get out in some clean air.
Well, Andy Simpson has improved by 2/10 over his best, but he's still 4/10 adrift of Lewis Wedding, but it does leapfrog him above Brenton Hobson, who's still sitting there on a 21.2. We know from, and I mean, unless he was telling me porkies, we know he's got more in him. Apparently he can do a 21 flat on full fuel, so he's obviously not found his full potential in this qualifying session just yet.
Not just yet. He seems to have a very strong first sector, Andy. He lost a little bit in Sector 2, and while he did gain time in Sector 3, Wedding's time through Sector 3 was absolutely untouchable. Oh,
and Foley's, Boak has gone around right in front of Scruff, and that may have affected Scruff's lap adversely, and Brenton Hobson had a huge moment into the same corner, which will have cost him some lap time, so he's pushing very hard to extract the best out of this car. We knew he wouldn't back off once he sealed the championship. He said he's in this championship for wins, and the championship, I mean, the point situation itself is secondary to wanting to win, but he's well down on this particular lap, so he's starting to run out of time. There's only 5 minutes remaining in this session.
Yeah, he's looking at the back of a couple of cars at the moment, Hobson, and thinking, it'd be nice for him to have a battle on his hands tonight. He always says that he's in it for the wins, but we know he's definitely a competitor. He doesn't want to win easy. He always likes to to have someone to race and to have a challenge laid in front of him. He's certainly got that in front of him tonight with Wedding and Andy Simpson laying down the gauntlet. And Johnny not that far away either.
No, not at all. He's only about a 1/10 and a half away from Hobson. There's a big gap at the moment between Brenton Foley and Will Devenish. There's a good half a second there for someone to slot into. And one of his closest competitors throughout this series has been Philip Boak, who hasn't set a lap time yet. We've seen him spinning around a number of times by the side of the circuit as the guy we've been on board with goes past him. So he's struggling at the moment to just nail a lap. And one would think that he'd be up there with Foley quite significantly. Quite significantly. And Brenton Foley's only half a 10th away from Cameron there, who's exactly 1 second slower than Lewis at this stage.
Yeah, Boakey and Brendan Ross are the only two guys yet to set a lap time. Boak on an outlap at the moment. Ross setting times just come out of the hairpin. But Boak's only got a handful of minutes left. He's only just got over 3.5 minutes to set himself a time. He'll get 2 or 3 runs at it on this run if he keeps it up. But he's going to have to at least keep it clean to find somewhere to slot into. Otherwise, he's going to be at the back of the grid.
That's right.
And he turns the headlights on now, Boak, and he won't want to be starting back a grid because, as we already said, passing here is going to be notoriously difficult.
Well, Hobson was on a PB as he went through the second sector, but I reckon he must have got a track cut because his lap hasn't counted there. There's no time on the screen, which suggests to me that he must have got a track cut. So this issue with the track limits being very, very heavily enforced by the game is starting to catch some people out, and Hobson, I don't know whether he ran out of fuel or whether he did that on purpose, or whether he did that by accident, but he's gone on at maggots, and there's only 2.5 minutes left in the session, so he'll only get at best 1 more lap in.
Yeah, the same thing happened to Brendan Ross as well, Stairs. When he crossed the line, it didn't register the time, so I can only say he probably got caught by the track cut situation as well. Boak went through sector 1 a half a second off the top time. He's now 3/4 of a second away from the top time through sector 2. So you're looking like he's going to slot probably in and around that 4th, 5th and 6th battle if he maintains this pace. So he'll be around the likes of Foley and Devenish. So you were talking about that gap that he might slot into, and it probably looks like it might even come to fruition. Let's see how he tackles the last turn.
It's just a knife edge. You've got to be absolutely on at this track, and 1.3 seconds off. That puts him just behind Brenton Foley. As I said, it was a nice big gap to slot himself into, and Boak finally pulling out a lap. Now the pressure's off somewhat. He'll get, if he's fueled, he'll get 2 more laps, but potentially only 1 more lap with the session. A minute and a half to go. So Philip Boak, and he's up by 3/10. So all of a sudden the pressure's off. He's found himself in a reasonable position, and he can push. And at that pace, he'll surpass Brenton Foley.
Yeah, he's the last runner, Brendan Ross, has finally set himself a time as well, which is good. So we've got all the runners in tonight's race have set themselves a time, and now we're just a matter of seeing who can find that little bit of improvement in the last couple seconds. Andy Simpson found himself another 3.5 tenths of a second, so closing in on Wedding.
And
he's
Foley,
less than a 10th away.
Foley's jumped up to 3rd, and he's ahead of Brenton Hobson at the moment. So Brenton Foley pulling out some incredible pace.
That's a surprise, and he's a Pro-Am runner as well, Stairs.
Oh, so Pro B. He started in Pro-Am.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, you're correct. He is in Pro B, so that's a good result. Andy Simpson's found nearly a 1/4 second, Stairs, on the top time through sector 1.
So that would be enough to surpass Lewis Wedding. So that's interesting. Boak improves, but not. He was up by more than that and remains 7th. So let's go and have a look at Andy Simpson as he approaches bridge. And the second sector split, we'll see if there's a line there, a little bit of lag there, but he's 2/10 up still. Maybe he lost a little bit of time, but he's still on target to nab pole position with the time expiring on the session now. So everyone now will be on their final laps, and if they're not on track already, then that's it.
Yeah, this is the critical sector, though, Stairs. This is where Wedding absolutely pulled out all the stops in this final sector. And he's got to get it right, and 2/10 may not be enough, but is it? No.
Oh, but 9,000th, 100th of a second there. So, and Brenton Hobson hasn't done anything. Actually, interestingly enough, Brenton Hobson, I don't think he would have gone second if Andy Simpson hadn't improved there, because he was only, was it 2/10 back? So yeah, Brenton Hobson 4/10 off Lewis Wedding. So when qualifying was very important, Brenton Hobson knew it. He just couldn't nab pole position.
That's right. The couple of late movers up the field, you're right, Hobson managed to leapfrog Foley again for the outside or the inside row of the grid. I'm not sure where third place is here on the grid. I know it's on the second row, but I'm not sure if it's inside or outside at this particular layout. But a good exchange between the top four. All the top four actually only separated by a half. Actually, top five only separated by 0.6 of a second. So very close.
That's very interesting. So Philip Boak incidentally improved by another 10th, but wasn't enough to gain him a position. So that'll be mightily frustrating from his point of view. So Brenton Hobson starts third. He did get back in front of Brenton Foley with that. So Foley with an excellent qualifying session. Johnny fifth, and he's looking the goods to surpass Will Devenish with that sort of time. And behind Johnny, we've got Cameron, who had a quiet qualifying session, but he's ahead of Philip Boak. Will Devenish in 8th, Rob Dunth 9th, and Aidan Schultz rounding out your top 10 as we head into a slightly extended warm-up session.
Yeah, we've got a 7-minute warm-up session instead of a 5-minute one for a change.
Yes, well, incidentally, that gives us a chance to have a short break, and on the other side of that break, we're going to bring you all the action from race 1 here at Northamptonshire. Don't go anywhere.
A lot of people go through life doing things badly. Racing's important to men who do it well. It's life. Anything that happens before or after, just waiting.
It's lights out and away we go. It's a great start from Sebastian Vettel. We come up the inside. McLaughlin gets it. They run, but the Red Bull Racing man has got through. The champion's done the job. They're all gone. They're all gone. Tander's off. McLaughlin's off. Make room. Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt. There's another 7-time champ. Jimmy Johnson wins his 7th NASCAR Sprint Cup championship.
Welcome back, everybody. We've got 5 minutes and 43 seconds until we start race 1, which is a bit more time than we normally have for the warm-up session. But quite a few cars taking to the track. We've seen sometimes in these warm-up sessions no one takes to the track, so a good chance for some last-minute practice. They've had their low fuel runs and they're reacquainting themselves, and Matt Williams there doing practice start, which I think is a very good idea given how important the start might be tonight.
Yeah, and given how full the grid is as well, Stairs, your clean start's going to be very important.
Incidentally, he could have been a little bit further in his box there, or he's having another go now. It's probably a good idea. And rolling a bit closer to his starting box. He won't be starting from second though, so a little bit further back, but a very good idea.
We've got about probably about a third of the field have decided to take to the circuit for some warm-up. We've also had one late entrant into the server. Voters joined.
Yes, our old favourite.
He hasn't set a qualifying time, so he's in the target Chip Ganassi car or lookalike car. But he'll be starting rear of grid, obviously, having not set a time.
Getting some practice in now, much needed. He does know this circuit from the F3s. Early on in his career, he did some racing in the Formula 3 series in Voda,
Yes, he did.
Looks like he's already got a dent in the front of his car there, so may have come a cropper somewhere early on in the lap.
Very, very possible. The couple of interesting notes from the qualifying. Probably aside from the usual suspects that are usually up towards the top anyway, and obviously Andy Simpson, the newcomer, being so high up the field as well. Probably one of the stars for qualifying for me, Stairs, is Brenton Foley. So justifying his Pro B promotion by putting it fourth on the grid for race number 1, which is very, very impressive. Probably no real big losers out of qualifying or anybody that's really disappointed. Most of the guys we expect to be in the sort of the top half of the field are there or thereabouts.
Well, Foley has had a few podiums in this series, and legitimate ones. Series, not to say that Pro-Am podiums are illegitimate, but legitimate in that going against seasoned Pro B and Pro A runners, he's managed to get podiums. So he's definitely no slouch, and he continues to impress me every week.
Yeah, and a lot of the guys that have either been promoted or are on the cusp of being promoted definitely show good racecraft, good turn of speed, and that they're learning every single week. And we've also seen that with the likes of the Rookie Cup as well. They're ever improving and ever getting better, and it will only be a matter of time before they start getting into the likes of these sorts of cars and mixing it with the big boys.
Well, we saw how quickly that Philip Oak and Brenton Foley got promoted. Incidentally, it seems to me like Brenton Foley has adjusted better to the Pro AB series than Philip Oak. Philip Oak absolutely dominated the Pro-Am running, so that's quite interesting to me. Perhaps Philip Oak is a driver who likes a bit of clear air, and Foley maybe is dealing with the melee at the beginning with all the other guys better on at the start of the race.
Yeah, you talk about melees. We do see a few guys tend to get tangled up earlier on in these races, and whether that's being tangled up in another incident or being tangled up behind a couple of cars that you just can't find a way to get past, it can ruin your race either way. So, as you're saying, if someone prefers a bit more of a seasoned qualifier, prefers to qualify toward the front and run in that clean air, that's their best for their rhythm. But when you sort of get buried down in the pack, very, very hard to find a rhythm, and been talking about it all night. Very, very hard to affect a pass at a circuit like this.
That's exactly right. Incidentally, having said what I said before about potentially doing better in amongst a melee of other cars, Brenton Foley managed to find a lot of clear air in Imola. I think it was the first race. He was very much alone for a lot of the race. As Voda takes out a number of cones there on the way into the pit entry. So he found himself in that sort of no man's land pace-wise behind the big Pro A guys, but head and shoulders above the Pro B, the guys that were sort of fighting over fifth, and a lot of the Pro B guys there. So obviously that allowed him to run his own race. I think I might be thinking of Phillip Island actually. Was a race where he was on his own, and basically didn't really have to fight for third in terms of on-track battles, but certainly earned it through his continuing race pace. But then the late race safety car meant he had to worry about the cars behind all over again, and he stood that test quite well.
Yeah, it's all about standing up when the pressure is on. And some guys are doing it better than others, and some guys, it takes a bit of time for them to learn how to cope with that pressure. But obviously Brenton Foley, when the pressure was on, he certainly dealt with it very, very well. And I didn't commentate that race for you, but I did watch the replay after Madbird filled in for me, and he definitely stood up when that challenge was laid down for him.
Well, the time has expired in this warm-up session, so we'll be rolling on into the race session itself very shortly indeed, as we look at Gary Neville going around the hairpin to rejoin the old bridge circuit, and just a handful of cars still left on the circuit, as our live timing gives us the checkered flag, which means we're about to jump into the race session. Here we are, not too far away from gridding up for the beginning of race 1 for round number 10 of this AMS Oz Super Series. Just got a handful of cars so far on the grid. I know some of them like to wait till the very last minute to grid up, save themselves a little bit of fuel. Personally, I don't think it makes a great deal of difference if you use 200 mil more or less of fuel on the grid, but perhaps a psychological thing more than anything else.
Yeah, more like a bit of a psychological thing, and they sit there and they just double check that their strategies are right. They just, you know, try and think they might put a bit of fear into someone's minds going, oh, you know, did I put the right amount of fuel in? Did I do this? Did I do that? Have I got the right tyres on? We've seen the tyre thing come up a couple of times. Incidentally, we've just lost Voda as well, so we're back down to 19 runners.
Lewis Wedding was a bit tardy.
Underway. Lewis
Wedding was probably a little bit tardy onto the grid there, but he made it, and he is the pole sitter. He will begin this race in P1 from Andy Simpson, who is starting his first race with us, and he joined the server under the name Andy without a surname. We do have another Andy in the series, and it's not him. So thankfully for us, he put in the differentiator of his surname. Brenton Hobson, third. That's not. I think it's probably his worst qualifying session for some time there. So I think he'll be disappointed with that, because I know he had more pace in it. So we'll see what he can do in the race. The second row, incidentally, the Brenton row. Brenton Foley with 4th place. Better get through this a quick lap. So Johnny starting in 5th place. He's aiming for first of the Pro B runners. Cameron there in 6th place from Philip Boak, who struggled to get a lap in. Eventually managed to get a decent one towards the end of that session. Will Devenish will start 8th. Rob Dunt in 9th. Aidan Schultz down there in 10th returns to the series. Brock Harvey in 11th place. Dwayne Davies in the Marlborough car there in 12th place. Matt Devine, stellar debut for Pro-Am last week, got a podium, and he's switched to the Tissot car this week. And Matt Williams down there in 14th place. He'll be a little bit further down than he would have liked, because he's trying to overhaul Brock Harvey in the points. Cracker starts 15th from Brendan Roth in 16th. Gary Neville 17th. Cam Rutledge in 18th. Luke 19th. And that is your grid as Lewis Wedding rounds the final corner and just backs the grid up a little bit. Bit of temperature in the brakes. And unfortunately, we don't have the best starting camera looking from behind, but at least we can see the lights.
Yeah, it's a bit of a welcome change, isn't it, Stairs, being able to see the lights go on. We normally have got cameras that look directly at the starting grid, and we can only hear the lights.
Yes, but Lewis Wedding will be absolutely eager. Ooh, Andy Simpson's overshot his grid box, had to reverse a little bit there, but and so has Cameron. He's actually, no, I think Cameron needs to go a bit further forward. He reversed. I think he thought he was over it, but he was actually too far back, and now he's lined up properly. So we should get the lights to get us away now. Lewis Wedding will be wanting to sweep into that first corner first, because he knows it's very difficult to pass around here, and he was dominant around here in the F3. So what can we get for race 1 here in the Super Series for round 10? Automobilista Super Series, race 1 is underway, and it looks like Andy Simpson's got up underneath Lewis Wedding. They're going to go through cops side by side, and he's got the inside as Andy Simpson, and Brenton Hobson has been overtaken there by Brenton Foley, and Lewis Wedding streaks clear, and all of a sudden he's back in the lead. So don't know if that was a missed gear change or something, but Andy Simpson losing out after the first corner.
We've got a spinner at the back as Rob Dunn, so must have got a little tap there, but he's managed to recover it, and the guys behind him, Brendan Ross, has managed to avoid him. But no, ripper start from Andy Simpson. It was also a good start from Philip Boak as well, but he couldn't do anything with it.
Well, Brenton Foley has gone wide down at the hairpin. Brenton Hobson's got up underneath him, but he doesn't have the run. He's going to have the inside into bridge, but he slots back in behind, and that's letting the leaders get away. Need a bit of a gap now, and Andy Simpson had a bit of a look at Lewis Wedding there and forces him to go defensive. So Lewis Wedding not having it all his own way, and a little bit of a moment there. He knows that Andy Simpson is looking racy right now and defending so early on. Brenton Foley nearly crashed into the back of them because they were too busy fighting each other, and that gap that they'd amassed after 2 sectors completely eroded in one corner.
Yeah, Johnny had a look at Brenton Hobson as well, Stairs, at turn number 10, but again, Hobson shut the door very, very firmly, and it's very much a single-file train at the moment, and Johnny's even got a little bit of damage in his door, so I'm wondering whether or not he even, that little bit of a look that he had at Hobson, they may have had a little bit of contact.
Well, this is what we were expecting. It was going to be very hard to pass, and certainly where it looked like a pass might be on, it was very difficult to make it stick, but Lewis Wedding going very defensive very early on, so he's in a position where he's got the luxury of being able to drive his own race, and this is a massive train we're seeing right now. I know it's only lap 2, but the cars are not spreading out the way that we have seen after even one lap of racing.
Oh, it's good to see that the close racing is there, but close racing...
Well, Brenton Foley looking like... Oh. Sorry to cut across you. Look, Andy Simpson went deep. Foley had a look up the inside, but nothing doing.
Yeah, I did catch that at the corner of my eye, but as I was saying, it's one thing to have the racing nice and close, but it's not really a race if you can't make a pass on somebody, but someone's going to have to make a move at some point, and Foley nearly did. Well,
I think Lewis Wedding may well be just thinking about the long game here. He wants his tyres to last, but he's driving in his mirrors more than anything right now, because everyone behind him seems like at this stage of the race they have more pace, so whether Lewis Wedding is just managing it, maybe at a certain point in time he'll pull the trigger and try and jump away, but Andy Simpson having a look to the inside, trying to distract Lewis Wedding more than anything. Very difficult to outbrake anyone into cops because you barely touch the brakes into that corner, and everyone else taking a slightly wider line through there than he does.
Yeah, you don't use the brakes at all through, or hardly at all through turn number 1. Andy looking to see if he can get Lewis to force him into a mistake. But the other thing to think about too, Stairs, we've said this numerous times in the series, these cars don't produce that much of a hole in the air where you can actually get a benefit from a slipstream. They follow each other quite nicely, so the slipstream is virtually nil effect.
Well, that's right, and shorter strokes as well compounds that. But because they're all nose to tail, it just takes one snatch brake, going wide of the apex by one car length is all that needs to happen for the car behind to slot its nose in. The two Brentons here are just falling a little bit back, and Hobson went for the inside there, and Foley saw him coming, gave him the room as Johnny goes wide, but it looks like Hobson's going to have the high ground through. He gets the inside, he gets the better drive, and he's made that position up into third, so look out, Andy Simpson, because Brenton Hobson is coming.
Yes, he is. We've lost Rob Duns, unfortunately, as well, Stairs, and Cam Rutledge has had a rather long stop, and he's just coming out of the pits now. He's going to come out right at the head of this, or in front of this train, but he's actually thinking sensibly here. He's pulled over to the side of the track. He's going to let the leaders go past. He knows he was going to go a lap down at some point. That's very sensible.
Oh, a bit of server lag, seeing Johnny's car just dipped into the ground, and if that happened in real life, you get a bit of whiplash, I'll tell you that much. But Brenton Hobson now, we get to see his real pace now that he's about a second behind Andy Simpson, because he can try and reel that gap in, and we'll get a sense of his true pace. Lewis Wedding has incidentally set the fastest lap at the head of the field with a 21.4, Andy Simpson a 21.7, but it means he's just starting to stretch his legs, and that gap growing ever so slightly now.
Yeah, there was interesting, a couple of people that lap around. Brenton Foley and Matt Devine had their lap times invalidated, which means they got pinged for a track cut somewhere around the course. So we'll have to keep an eye on that to see if anybody does it on more than one occasion.
Absolutely.
Foley having a bit of a look at the back of Brenton Hobson again. He wants that place back.
Yes, that was Matt Devine and Brenton Foley. We'll put that on our little notebooks there because we want to start counting those, because we know that once you get a certain number of those, you will get a penalty. And contrary to what we saw at Imola there last week, with people taking some liberties with the track, especially at Piratella, you can go well off the circuit and extend. But Andy is not letting Lewis go right now. It was just a tenth slower than Lewis on the previous time around. Lewis dipping ever so close to the 20 bracket. He did a 21.1 the last time around, and Brenton...
Oh, we got Cameron.
Oh, he is round.
Cameron's gone around right in front of Boat, but Boat managed to squeeze through beautifully. Just a little bit of a tap, but Cameron got it sideways out of Maggots all by himself, and he's dropping all the way down the field as Crack has to take a bit of evasive action as well.
Yeah, let's have a look at the replay of that as he goes through. You're right, the Maggots hairpin just it's all, and Boak did very well to avoid. He predicted the right way that Cameron was going to continue to go, and Cameron sensibly waiting for a gap in the traffic. Ooh, Cracker, as you said, very, very close, but everyone else managed to get through without too much hindrance, and now Cameron back there in 13th, all the way back there, just fighting Cracker for 12th and 13th place, so that's disappointing for Cameron. But back at the head of the field, Brenton Hobson, who I mentioned was a little bit under pressure from Foley. He's just stretched that back again, but he's not making a huge impression on Andy Simpson and Lewis Wedding ahead of him just yet.
No, in actual fact, he's losing a bit of touch with the guys out in front there, Hobson. The timing's going up by about a couple of tenths every lap for the last lap or two. We're just waiting for the timing screens to update. They're behind a little bit, but he didn't do a faster time than the guys ahead, Brenton Hobson, and Foley's doing his best to stick with him here, but it's the two leaders out in front, or the front row starters out in front at the minute, that are still very, very close together on track, and a couple of other battles down the field are 2x2 as well. Well,
Andy Simpson was the fastest through the first sector on the previous time around, and he's closed right back up to Lewis Wedding. He was 2 tenths faster than Lewis through the first sector on this lap, and they all matched each other 10th for 10th on lap 5. I don't know whether Lewis made an error or whether Andy Simpson has just turned up the wick a little bit.
Yeah, I think Andy's just got back into his rhythm after having a couple of little bites of the cherry and not making any inroads into, or not being able to get underneath Lewis Wedding. So I really just gave it a little bit of an time just to settle down, get back into a rhythm, and now he's applying the blowtorch yet again.
Well, we know Lewis Wedding has been in this scenario from Brenton Hobson a few times in this series, and whenever that's happened, Lewis Wedding has burnt out his tyres or had some sort of issue. With Barbagallo was one of those times where he got the car stuck. Trying to remember if that was the Supercars or the Super Series. I think it was the Supercars, actually, come to think of it. But nonetheless, both tin top series, so Brenton Hobson, let's look at his lap time. He's done a 20 flat the previous time around. 21 flat the previous time around, so he was 2 tenths faster than Lewis, but not faster than Andy. So Andy, the quickest man on the circuit right now, and Brenton Hobson a close second.
Yeah, very, very close. They both did 21 flats, but the differences were minuscule. It was only 300ths of a second between their lap times that last time around, between second and third place. So Hobson now starting to match his pace with the leaders, but not able to bridge the gap just or significantly enough just yet. As we're getting 7 laps in, we'll be getting close to half distance shortly.
A bit of an update on everyone else. While this has been going on, Brock Harvey's come a cropper somewhere. He's down there in 17th place, starting well ahead of Matt Williams, who ever the improver on the first lap. He's gone up to 10th place. And from his lowly starting position, he's gone up 4 positions through attrition and just consistency, and that'll be good for his push to overtake Brock in the points standings.
Yeah, certainly will. He always seems to be one of the movers or the big movers in any of our races. He always seems to do well at gaining positions. Coincidentally, Matt Devine's the other man who's made some good ground from the start. He's made 5 places. He started down in down in 13th. And he's now up to 8th. And he was having a nice little scrap with Schultz for a moment there, but Schultz has just got the better of him and has just pulled away to the tune of nearly a second now.
Another battle to look out on track 4 is Johnny and Brenton Foley. Brenton Foley seems to be falling back into the clutches of Johnny at this stage. The previous time around, Brenton Foley did a 22.4 and Johnny a 21.8, so he seems to be much faster than Foley at the moment. And Andy Simpson's just yo-yoing a bit. He was 2 tenths slower than Lewis on the previous occasion, and Brenton Hobson's closing in to make this a 3-car battle for the lead.
Yeah, very, very slowly closing in. Johnny had a little bit of a wild moment through turn 9 and 10. Just dropped a little bit of time to Foley, but he's still got plenty of time to make that up. But he doesn't want to be sliding his tyres too much, otherwise he'll lose them. And we already spoke about how punishing the left-hand side of this car is going to get tyre wear the longer this race goes on, as we're on the half-distance lap now.
That's right, and as the old saying goes, with half the race complete, there's half the race to go. So Johnny did drop time to Foley on that lap, so they were both in the 22s on the previous occasion. But our leaders, all three of them, at 21.5, so they're matching each other 10th for 10th. So Brenton Hobson does not have it all his own way trying to catch these guys. He needs them to start battling each other.
Yeah, he certainly does. He needs them to start slowing each other down so they can he can catch up to them a bit more. Brock Harvey trying to make his way through the pack as well, but again, as we already said, having overtaking being a major issue, but he's gained a place on Luke there, but just by virtue of Luke going wide at Cops Corner, and Matt Williams and Dwayne Davies had a similar arrangement as well, where Matt went a little bit wide and Dwayne tried to get underneath him, but couldn't make it happen. But that's unfortunately how most of the passing seems to be happening, is through people making a few mistakes.
We have to feel that Andy is faster than Lewis at the moment. The way he's just able to clamber all over the back of that Porsche, that Lime Green Steel Series Porsche. So he might be close enough to have a half look down into Cops if he gets a good run. He does seem to be right on the back of him. Lewis has gone defensive, so he might get a better exit through out of Cops there. This is the moment. This is the moment. Oh, no, he just wasn't able to get underneath without having to back out of the throttle. But he is side by side, and Lewis is moving across to try and cover the line. That was a little bit rude, but I think it was all right. And this is the ticket that Brenton Hobson wanted. Yes. Brenton Hobson has got the ticket. He's gone through the turnstiles, and he has arrived at the battle for the lead.
Yeah, he has. That was music to Brenton Hobson. Seeing that. Johnny and Foley in the background. I just caught it as well, Stairs. We were watching that battle. That was very, very close for comfort. Yeah,
we're going to have a look at a replay of that, because it looks like Johnny had a bit of a go down there at Maggots and lost it. Let's have a look. Oh, he got onto the grass there and ever so nearly went into the back of Brenton Foley and lit it up on the wrist. So those tyres are screaming right now for Johnny, as we rejoin the battle for the lead, and a three-car battle it is. So with Andy Simpson, it's do or get done right now.
Yeah, just while you were watching the replay of Johnny and Foley, there's first signs of the pressure that Andy Simpson's under. A little bit of tyre squeal and a bit of tyre smoke moment out of the turn 7 hairpin down at the Abbey corner. And Hobson took a little bit of a wider line on the hope that he might be able to get a bit better drive out. But
it's round 2 into Cops here.
Look again.
Well, he wasn't quite as close as he was on the previous lap, but...
Wedding's had a moment.
Oh, and that's a bad place to have a moment, because that's one of the longest straights down. He's gone for the inside. I think he'll be all right. He'll get it braked down into this corner. If he can get it stopped at the hairpin, and if Andy Simpson doesn't get up and underneath him, but Lewis Wedding made the apex nicely. It's do or get done if you're Andy Simpson. He's in this horrible position of being both the attacker and the attackee.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Johnny's lost it somewhere. Sorry, Johnny's lost it, and he's down there in 6th. So Philip Boak has moved up to 5th.
Yep. He has, and Hobson, the quickest man out of the leading trio that time around. He closed right in on the leading pack. But this is supreme racing. These guys are giving each other room. They're defending well. They're defending fairly, and this is going to. I think this is going to come down to who makes the mistakes.
That's it.
What we've been talking about all night.
I think Lewis. Well, Lewis is one of those guys who's got a smart head on young shoulders. I think he would live by that Jackie Stewart mantra of win the race in the slowest time possible, because you don't want to take any unnecessary risks. And sure, it certainly makes for a more heart-pounding adventure to the line, but Lewis Wedding's not going to die wondering. He's going to make sure that he doesn't lose this race through some silly mistake spinning off. He'll have made the others earn it.
Yeah, he definitely will. He's definitely earning his paycheck today, Lewis Wedding. It's interesting with Johnny having dropped off the back of Brenton Foley. Guess who's right behind Johnny at the moment, Stairs?
Will Devenish, and that's that's interesting for the points. He wants to stay ahead of Devenish because, well, that means that he won't drop points to Will Devenish, as obvious as that sounds, but he had it comfortably in hand, really. He must have just burned through his tyres. And Lewis Wedding is very, very defensive through into the hairpin here, and Andy Simpson will have a better drive out there, but there's really nowhere to go. It's a single file exit, and it's just very difficult to cut up underneath, but Lewis Wedding, he's going to be very tired of seeing that blue Reza guest snake car in his rear vision mirrors, but he's defending everywhere.
And speaking of making passes down at the hairpin, Johnny's just made a beautiful move down at that same hairpin on Matt Devine, and Matt's now trying to have a go at him on the run back through bridge, and has the line as well. But Johnny sweeps around the outside and actually gets it done, and that's crucial for Johnny, because the more cars he can put between himself and Will, the better his point's going to be. Those two guys having only been separated by 2 points in the standings, and right now that if the points situation is what it is,
not forgetting Matt Devine. Matt Devine is Pro-Am, so that is not actually a position that'll net him extra points on Will Devenish. So because they're in 2 different championships effectively, but Andy Simpson, oh, he's oh so close. It's just really becoming apparent how difficult it is to pass here, and something Lewis Wedding may well be grateful for right now.
Yeah, certainly so. And we've still got 18 runners in the field, having our only DNF being Rob Dunt, and the only man being one lap or a couple of laps down is Cam Rutledge, having that stop.
Well, he's going to try and drive around the outside, but Andy Simpson with nowhere to go. He's almost gone too deep and let Brenton Hobson through. But Lewis Wedding is just absolutely... He's driving the defensive line everywhere now, because he is worried about Andy Simpson making a dive, which really is probably the only... Oh, he's nearly the only way to make a pass here, and they were all sorts of out of shape through there, and he's diving every which way and where, and there's going to be nowhere to go, but because Brenton Hobson is going to be diving up the inside if he doesn't get the job here, and here he goes. He's going to get it. He's going to get it. Oh, he's cut him off. Andy Simpson cut off Brenton Hobson there. Brenton Hobson won't be too pleased with that. They've both had to back out of the throttle, and that was what Lewis Wedding needed. He can breathe on his way to Cops right now.
He can breathe, but it's only by about 0.3 of a second, as this leading trio is still absolutely rampaging around the circuit with 5 laps to go. It's up for grabs, and you're right, I don't think Hobbo would have been too thrilled to see that blue Porsche cut across his nose a bit, but Hobson's smart, and I think he would have just checked up a little bit and not want to risk having an accident. But this is an enthralling battle, isn't it, Stairs?
It is, and there's 4 laps to go, and Brenton Hobson will be thinking, God, I wish it was more. I wish it was more. Lewis Wedding will be going, geez, I wish it was less. Geez, I wish it was less. But now that's the line that Lewis Wedding takes into that corner. He's been well acquainted with that, and they've all collided with each other. They've nose to tailed, and Andy Simpson is the loser in that one. He's lost out. Brenton Hobson doesn't want to make a position that way, but I know that he won't believe that it's his fault, and I don't think it is. It was just everyone checked up when Andy Simpson went into the back of Lewis Wedding, and Brenton Hobson would have had nowhere to go, not expecting the cars in front to collide. But Brenton Hobson moves up into 2nd place. Now he's got an opportunity to do something about Lewis Wedding.
Yeah, I think that'll come down to a racing incident for sure, Stairs, that Simpson was applying the pressure to Wedding. Wedding went deep, but unfortunately Simpson couldn't pull it up either and ran into the back of him, and consequently Hobson gave him a little tap as well. There's not too much damage on those cars, so they'll be able to continue. But it just goes to show that these guys don't want to give an inch, but they're doing it fairly, and that one will definitely be just a racing incident. Nothing malicious in that. Well,
yes, I mean, Brenton Hobson was the big winner out of that, but it was just the way the cards fell. It was unfortunate for Simpson. It's always the way you, when you're the first car trying to make a move, if it doesn't work out. Oh, and Brenton Hobson has a little bit of a nibble down there into the Maggots hairpin. Is it actually called the Maggots hairpin? It's just where it is, basically. It's where Maggots happens to take off from. Not used to calling it a hairpin, though. But, well, Lewis Wedding, for the first time in a number of laps, doesn't take the defensive line into that hairpin. Because Brenton Hobson just wasn't quite close enough. I wonder if he'll actually be slightly more comfortable with Hobbo, the devil you know, behind than Andy Simpson, who's something of an unknown, and seems to be dropping away at this stage.
Yeah, I'm 100%. Yeah, he's dropping away a little bit. Interesting to note too, Stairs, that Will Devenish has actually come into the pits. He'd lost out of position to Aiden Schultz, but he's in the pits now. So Johnny Sets seems to leapfrog Will Devenish in the Pro B runnings as it currently stands.
Incidentally, Devine's got back ahead of him, and but yes, it won't cost him too much in terms of points, and advantage Johnny in the Pro B series.
Absolutely. So I'm not sure what Devenish's trouble is there, but we've had our second retirement as well with Luke. He had a bit of a spin a couple of laps ago, and we're keeping an eye on that. Johnny, coincidentally, monstering the back of Matt Devine again, so those two are having a good old scrap for the last few places. Will Devenish has just got a penalty too. I think that'll be obviously he was in the pit, so that's got to be lane speeding, and we we touched on that earlier in the broadcast, that most of the guys have been well behaved for a while.
Well, here is another, sorry to cut across you, here is another element to add to Lewis Wedding's stress. We've got traffic now, and they're all diving out the way. Well, that's very well behaved. They're completely stopping there. That was Dwayne Davies involved, I think. Cracker as well. And they've all dived out the way, so they don't want to affect this leading battle at all, and props to them just diving out the way. It's an issue that we have when we're on a shorter track and more laps.
Yeah, Brendan Ross did well to get out of the way there as well, and Andy's just dropped back from this group a little bit. I think he was being rather aggressive with his attack in the early laps.
Yeah.
Maybe he's taken a bit too much out of those front tyres.
He was down in the 22s on the previous lap, whereas the leaders were in the 21s. Brenton Hobson, the fastest of those three on the last circuit. But Lewis Wedding at 21.9, he just has that little bit of breathing space, and he'll start to believe now because there's only 2 laps to go, and he's kept Brenton Hobson behind for this long. He's kept Andy Simpson behind for this long. Can he bring it home? He's just got 1 lap and 2 sectors to go.
What do you think Hobson's going to do here, Stairs? Do you think he's having another bit of a look now? He's got very, very close, but do you think he'll want to win this, surely, but he won't risk it. He won't risk a silly move.
Well, absolutely, but he's pretty close, and if ever he was going to lick the stamp, another penalty for Will Devenish, if ever he was going to lick the stamp and send it, this would be the place, and Lewis Wedding knows that, and I think his best bet is to just force Lewis Wedding to make a mistake. Lewis Wedding, incidentally, is very well acquainted with breaking on the inside into that hairpin, so he knows how to get it stopped on the defensive line and carry enough speed to remain in the lead. But my bet, you put $1 each way at this stage.
Well, look at this as I come through the last couple of turns. Hobson just giving just a little kiss on the back of that bumper as well of Wedding. He's letting him know that he's there. Wedding's he's led from start to finish, and he'll be praying that he can.
Ooh, there's a bit of a wiggle there for Hobson, and that's crucial because that is one less corner where he may well have an opportunity. He's still fast, but I think Lewis doesn't have to defend into this corner, so it's sort of, you've given away 2 opportunities there. You can't make the move into Cops, and then because Lewis isn't defending into Cops, then you can't make the move into the next corner.
No, certainly not. But next opportunity for a pass is here, but Hobson's a bit too far back, but he closes in.
Oh, he made a bit of a mistake there, but he hasn't. Oh, he's spun! He's round! He's round on the last lap. Brenton Hobson spins, and an uncharacteristic mistake on the last lap. Lewis Wedding will be breathing a sigh of relief. He now has a 1.2 second lead, and Andy Simpson back up into second. The guys are well clear of Brenton Foley in 4th, so it'll still be a podium, but Brenton Hobson will be disappointed with that.
Oh, certainly will, and we just caught it that he just took a little bit of grass. I'm just wondering whether or not that unsettled the car, and he had to correct himself. We'll obviously get the word from the horse's mouth himself. But the 2 front row starters, as they started, will finish that way, and actually the top 4 will finish as they qualified. So eventually it all settled down.
Well, yes, we got there, but the method through getting there was most entertaining, and Lewis Wedding will be mightily satisfied with that. He got his last win there in Phillip Island. We know he didn't want to take a win by jumping Hobson on the line, but this one was earned fair and square, and what a win for Lewis Wedding. He'll be richly pleased with that one.
Yeah, as I said before, he definitely was earning his paycheck today, and he certainly led every lap start to finish, but boy did he earn it.
And Brenton Foley had quite a lonely race in the end, finishing 5th there ahead of a lapped car. He really earned that one. It was another one where he had some pressure. Johnny was attacking him. Philip Boak finishes 5th, and then the battle here between Johnny and Matt Devine was very close. We're watching the timing screens. In the end, Matt Devine prevailing over that. Not for points, but for pride, because they're in different classes. But Johnny down there in 7th does no harm at all to his bid to overtake Will Devenish, and Matt Williams improving to 8th. That's a mighty effort from him for where he started.
Certainly is. Matt Devine was up 7 places from his starting point. Matt Williams was up 6.
Aiden crashing his way across the line. Has he actually crossed the line?
Yes,
I assume he has.
Crosses in 10th.
Yes, the start and the finish line is in a different spot. Brock Harvey recovered to 11th place, so damage limitation for him. And Gary Neville in 12th. Dwayne Davies 13th. Brendan Ross 14th. We're starting to look at, we'll be looking, Will Devenish had a difficult race, and then some of the DNFs. Rob Dunt was the first of those, so, sorry, the first man to DNF, not the first of them, in terms of points, because you do get points for not finishing in this series, which will not be the case next time out in the Super Series. But
well,
Lewis
the man
Wedding.
of the moment's in here at the moment, isn't he? So Lewis has come in for a little bit of a discussion about that race, and I guess the first question we want to ask was that, well, first of all, we want to say to you, Lewis, you definitely earned that race win. Congratulations. You didn't have, you led from start to finish, but boy, did you have to earn it.
Yeah, that was the most. I think I can safely say that's the most intense racing I've had ever. I think that was pretty crazy. Obviously, I got my qualifying lap spot on, and then I thought I was going to get like a practice starts and thought I was going to get away perfectly. I got away perfectly, but obviously Andy got away just better. But I hung it out there and hung on to first and on the first lap. But it was a couple chances that he had that I saw coming early, thankfully enough, and was able to fend off. And then after that, first few laps, it was sort of, I was able to deal with it a bit when my tyres were all right, but obviously as the tyres wore down a bit, for me anyway, the pace wasn't quite there, and obviously when you're defending all the time, you're not as fast as what you normally are when you're in clear air. So it was just, yeah, just fighting for my life there.
You saw you're well acquainted with the defensive line, the inside line through some of those hairpins there, and it almost actually looked like once Andy lost out to Hobson, that it almost looked like you were a little bit under less pressure from Hobson than you were from Andy, because he was just a little bit further away, and there was a few occasions where you didn't feel the need to fend into the hairpins.
Yeah, Hobbo took, when I was, obviously, I've raced with Hobbo before, and like his driving style is, he's really smooth, while when I was watching Andy in practice and stuff, obviously he was a bit more rougher with the car, and obviously, as I found out in the race, he brakes really late for that hairpin. And even so, like my line through that hairpin is pretty shallow anyway, because I find if I take the wider line that Andy and even Hobbo to some extent take, that I don't quite get it right. I miss the apex or just lose time. And then obviously a couple of times I had to go even shallower because I had Andy or Hobbo right behind me, but it worked out. And there was a couple of times where I had to even back off in the middle of corners, because if I knew if I accelerated normally, that they would have that clear run into the next corner. So I had to sort of balk them in the mid corner just to stunt that. And that happened more than I'd like, but obviously they were a bit faster to be in that race.
Well, your experience certainly coming to the fore there, and well, what a win under pressure.
Yeah, that's I think that's probably the either the best win or the second best win I've had, because after seeing Andy, and obviously we know how good Hobbo is, that I wasn't really expecting to be winning this race. So yeah, that was a very good win.
Certainly was. Well, we saw Andy actually did sort of fall away in the end. He wasn't really able to hold up. He wasn't able to go with you guys once Hobbo got by him, and it looks like he was suffering with a bit of tyre wear at the end. So does that give you confidence heading into the second race?
I don't know if it gives me any extra confidence, but the way he was driving sort of didn't leave any illusions that towards the end of the race he might have some tyre wear problems, because he was he works his tyres pretty hard.
Yes, well, we certainly saw that. Well, we've been joined by Brenton Hobson, who has jumped into the box with us now. So, Brenton, you certainly gave us a hell of an exciting show for that. I don't think there were many times where we weren't looking at that battle for the lead, but it just didn't quite go your way today.
Yeah, well, that's right. I don't have to worry about championship points or anything now, so decided to send it and have a crack there at the end, and just didn't have the tyres at the end there to really do it. Had to use them up a bit much there to get through a couple of people at the start and try and catch up that gap and stuff like that. So took me a little while to get up to speed today. I think I've sort of got a bit of a groove going now, but nerfed it in quali, went slower on low fuel than I was doing in warm-up on a full fuel, and it was a shocker. So, yeah, it was a tough start, but hopefully this one we can go a little better and maybe challenge all the way through the race instead of just at the end.
Well, yeah, I mean, we heard from you during the day that you were pretty confident on heavy fuel to do sort of 21s, and that was what you were expecting for race pace, but it just didn't quite come together in the qualifying. So, and with a circuit like this so difficult to pass, that was a very crucial thing for you.
Yeah, I just got a bit keen in the qualifying session. I took the fuel out and was trying to squeeze a little more out of it everywhere to try and, grab those few tenths. And, I knew I could. I don't know if I could go quick enough to match Lewis there, but I certainly could have gone quick enough to get, within a couple of tenths probably. And I just got a bit keen and was getting on the throttle a little early, braking a little too late, making mistakes. And I should have just been running a more conservative sort of line and be a little bit less aggressive, and I probably would have gone quicker. But lesson learned. It's a tough track. It's a really hard one. I haven't found a really good groove, really. I haven't felt comfortable at this track at all. So it's a bit of a struggle this week.
There you go, a bit of a struggle, but certainly gave us a show right to the end. We wish you all the best with the second race, but looking at the race pace, I mean, the top three are all within a tenth of a second with your best lap of the race, so that bodes well for us for race 2.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be good fun. I'm really just enjoying it. So I just want to be involved in the battle the whole way this time, not sort of sitting back there watching. But assuming I can get up there and get amongst it, I'll be happy.
Well, we wish you the best for the second race, and we certainly hope so too. We were enjoying that very much, and we hope to enjoy the second race just as much as the qualifying session looks to be about to get underway. We've got a queue of 5 or 6 cars already making their way to the end of the pit lane, waiting for that light to go green.
Yeah, qualifying about to get underway. Stairs, I hope you don't mind, I'm having a bit of a look at the point situation at the moment just to see how it all sort of pans out. With that win, Lewis Wedding kicks on to 196 points, which puts him 36 points clear of Johnny, who moves ahead of Will Devenish into third position with the better result. Will obviously having a little bit of a disastrous race that time around. But we've still got another race to go, and anything is possible.
Well, that would mean that he only needs to outscore Johnny by 4 points in this race to have second sewn up. Because after tonight, there'll only be 40 points left on the board with 2 races remaining.
Yeah, that is correct. That second place is the only position on the board that could be sewn up by the end of tonight. All the other positions, 3 and 4, which were under dispute, and 5, 6 and 7 are the only real ones that can possibly change hands tonight with 1 and a bit rounds get to go now.
Well, it's a toss-up who prevails in this qualifying session, because I don't think we saw the best of Brenton Hobson in the previous qualifying session. I think he said it himself. He probably got a little bit too aggressive, maybe. And we certainly saw that was the case on a couple of laps. He just overcooked it on a few corners, and maybe the smoother driving style of Lewis Wedding was the reason he prevailed in that first qualifying session.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, Stairs. Hobson just took probably a little bit too long to get acclimatised to the way that he generally likes to get acclimatised to the track, and I would like to see that we probably get a little bit better qualifying out of him in this particular race. I mean, he'll certainly be wanting to make amends for that last lap uncharacteristic mistake that ultimately cost him a shot at having a win on that final lap.
Well, it's interesting you said, he's sewn up the championship, so points don't matter for him. He's not really here for second or third place. He wants to win, which incidentally was his mentality before he sewed the championship up, basically. But perhaps, I don't know what Brendan Ross is doing there. Anyway, it suggests to me that perhaps even it's just in the back of his mind there was a slight bit of conservatism in the way that Brenton Hobson was approaching his races prior to last week.
Yeah, it did sound like it was going to be that way. I mean, he's told us many times that he was obviously here for the wins. He wasn't here for second place, but He's a racer, and he's a very gracious man, even when accepting victory or accepting defeat. He treats everything the same way, and that's what we like about him as being the champion-elect. As Will Devenish comes across to set a time, but unfortunately it did not register, which means got pinged.
And Brenton Foley then becomes the first man to set a time, so 22.3 from him. And Philip Oak is on a lap where he's done a purple middle sector, if we can just find him. Did I say Foley? I meant Boak. And Boak has surpassed Foley by a 0.07, and some Richie Benno fans may appreciate this. He's done it with a 122.222. So the Philip Boak in provisional pole from Brenton Foley, Brock Harvey just 3/10 down, and Gary Neville 2.5 seconds off the pace. And those are the 4 men who've set times so far in this qualifying session.
And Johnny across the line now, but on an out lap. And we're just looking at the start-finish line here to see who's on the move. And
Brenton Hobson set a first purple sector, so we wait to see what he's done in the second sector, whether he's continued that form. He'll be the first of the top 3 to set a time, I believe. And he's 1 second up, so he's well on his way to a fairly formidable time.
And Devenish coming across the line now, and he didn't register a time for the second lap consecutively, so obviously he's having some sort of trouble somewhere.
Foley's improved. Foley has improved to a 21.7. Brenton Hobson is coming around the final corner now, and we saw he was full second up, which means that he might be on for a sub 20, and yes, he is. 1 minute 20.7. Now we are talking.
Yeah, now we're getting into the business end. The 20.7 is still a 10th off the best off the pole time from the last race, which was coincidentally Lewis Wedding. He's also actually a bit slower than Andy Simpson as well, but the top 3 times from the weekend so far, 20.6 to Wedding, 20.6 to Andy, and a 20.7 to Hobson. So those top 3 are at it again.
Yes, well, we're waiting for Lewis Wedding, who is looks like he's on track, but he hasn't set any sector times just yet, or no, he hasn't. He's in the third sector at the moment on his outlap, so he'll be lighting those timing screens up soon, trying to reply to Brenton Hobson's 20.7, and on the Hollywood, he's doing some Hollywood times right now, so go back up to over a second when Hobson comes across the line to finish this lap, and he's taking another 2/10. My goodness, that is quick.
Now we got the fastest time of the weekend on the board, a 20.5 to Brenton Hobson, and you were right, Stairs, we hadn't seen the best of him. I think we're starting to see that right now.
Well, it is a trend. Whenever we've seen that Brenton Hobson has been slightly off the pace in the first race, he rectifies.
Andy's just crossing to start. He's like, where's Lewis Wedding in all of this? He's coming up to Sector 2 split now on his first flying lap.
Yes, so he hasn't set the world on fire with his first sector. He was he's 4 seconds off it, so he's made a mistake there.
Nor with the second sector either. He was 5.9 seconds off a top time, so I think he's had a mistake somewhere, or he's backed out of this lap, but this is not going to be a representative time for Lewis Wedding. This is going to be far from it.
Well, I think Andy Simpson may have he was on a lap, I think, but it didn't register the previous time around, if I'm not mistaken, and he's 3/10 off in the first sector, so, well, having said that, 3/10 off the time that Brenton Hobson destroyed the field with isn't that bad, actually, because it'll still put him second if he maintains that gap.
And he's maintained a decent run through the first 2 sectors well, Hobson, but he got pinged for a corner cut there, so that time didn't register, but that was looking mighty strong for the first 2 sectors, so he obviously got a bit of an issue in sector 3 somewhere.
I think it's tits out for Brenton Hobson. He's just absolutely on it, and honestly, I'm going to call it now. I'll be surprised if someone beats that time that he's already laid down with 7.5 minutes to go in this session, because so far, Lewis Wedding and Andy Simpson, his closest rivals in the...
Down, and who could blame them?
Well, Andy Simpson has gone second, but still some 8/10 off the pace. We're going to have a look at... well, Brenton Foley's the man in third. He's just starting another lap. We'll see if Lewis Wedding is on a... No, he's not on a timed lap. He must be on an out lap. So... Wedding, we'll have to wait a few more. Actually, no, he is on a timed lap. I beg your pardon. It was just giving me a still time, not a counting timer. But now it is, and I don't know. He's already well off. Yeah.
No, he had a track
He did
cut
have a
on
track
that
cut.
lap
Okay.
stairs.
It's sometimes the timing graphic doesn't count up when when they've been on a track cut lap, but on that occasion it was counting up, so we weren't to know until he crossed the line.
That's right.
But this lap will give us a better indication of what Lewis can do in reply. But he's got a bit of traffic. Will Devenish and Brenton Hobson, incidentally. He probably won't be troubled by Brenton Hobson, but oh, he's up. He's up by 200ths. And Lewis and Will got out the way, so all stations go for Lewis Wedding. Let's stick with him and see what he can do.
Well, apart from Lewis Wedding, Johnny and Matt Williams, the only other two drivers yet to set a time, and Matt Williams behind Lewis Wedding on track at the moment. Johnny, actually, where's he on track at the moment? He's also behind Wedding as well. But, geez, this is going to be mighty close there. This is going to be a front row for Wedding if he keeps this pace. And we did see in the first qualifying, he was mighty through this final sector.
He was. I may have called it too early, Nether. Yeah. I may have called it too early. I'm in a bit of a spot here because I just blew my nose and some of the snot went in my eye, so I'm dealing with one eye at this stage. But Lewis Wedding coming across the line and 3/10 of a second, so the strongest sector for him in the first race was where he lost it all in the second qualifying session.
Yeah, well, for the moment, he's still got 5 minutes, Lewis Wedding, so while you rectify yourself there, Andy's actually found some time too, so he's 2.5 tenths up on his PB, but he's 15 hundredths up on his the top time. So, where's this coming from?
I think the final sector was not his strongest though. So can he hold on to that lead as he goes through here? We know his braking was his strong point, and the final sector doesn't have a lot of heavy braking. It's all about the patience through those final two corners. But what can Andy Simpson deliver? Will he go pole? Wow. Yes, he has. I called it too early. I called it way too early. We're heading towards the 19s here.
Well, we're getting close. Hobson's back out on the track again, and he's up to sector 2 split, and he's 3 tenths off the new top time at the moment, as we've got a yellow flag, local yellow flag somewhere out on the track. But
well, let's just sit down and appreciate what Andy Simpson has done. He's demolished that time. And
where did that come from?
It came in the first and the final sectors. He wasn't as quick in the middle sector by about 13 hundredths, but the first sector and the final sector he was purple.
Well, we did see it took him a little bit of time to, when he got close to Wedding's time. I mean, what was it on the first race? He came within about 9 thousandths or something, wasn't it, of Wedding's time? It was mighty close.
It was very close. Give me a second, and I have got it on my phone here. But Lewis Wedding, does he have an answer? Does he have an answer?
Does Brenton Hobson have an answer?
Well, do any of them have an answer? I mean, I called it when Brenton Hobson did a 20.5. I didn't think any of them could beat that. But Andy Simpson has not just beaten it, he's beaten it by 3/10 of a second.
Yeah, he's looking really, really good. And probably got that pole position that he potentially going to have that pole position that he very, very nearly had in the last race. But not satisfied with that. Doesn't think he's safe, Andy, because he's on the move again in the pit lane. So he might get another he might be lucky to get a 2-lap run in here if he gets around. It's 3 minutes left on the clock, and it's a minute 20-odd lap. So he'd be very close to getting 2-lap run in.
There we go. Lewis Wedding's pole time in Quali 1 was a 20.628, which is only about 1/10 and a half faster than what he's on right now. Both of the guys in first and second have beaten that time so far. And Andy Simpson was 1/1000th of a second slower than Lewis Wedding in the first race. So he's found something. He's got the spade out. He's dug deep, and he's found something.
Oh, he certainly has. Hobson's going to get another 2-lap run in here. Wedding's on a lap at the moment, so if he gets back to the line, Wedding, he'll definitely get one more. Not sure if he's fueled for another one after that. But
he's backed out of this lap because he's found traffic, and he's probably realised that he wasn't going to beat these two. And so depending on how much he's fueled, he might have 2 laps. Given how quickly the tyres go off, actually, he probably hasn't, because you probably wouldn't plan for a 3-lap qualifying run given how quickly you can overheat them here.
That's right. Coincidentally, we've lost a couple of runners since the qualifying for race 1, or the end of race 1, sorry. We've lost a couple of runners. We did have a couple of retirements toward the end, so we're down to 16 runners as Andy starts his first of what will possibly be a 2-lap run. Hobson just coming through the final complex at the moment. Hasn't set the timing screens alight. Taking a very wide line and a late apex for the second part of the last turn, or the second last turn, which is the Luffield corner. I'm not sure if that's intentional to try and get a bit more straight line.
I think he must have got a track cut through
turn
sector 2, actually. Yeah, he doesn't set a time. I'm pretty sure he got a track cut, so this will be his last lap because he crossed the line with 1:15 to go.
And Wedding's aborted 2 Stairs, so he's
he's going
to have to settle for third. So the only man that can surpass Simpson at this point is likely to be Brenton Hobson, but he's going to, let's see what the sector 1 time is, but he's going to have it all to do. And he's up on PB, but he's still a 10th and a half away from Andy's
he's
time.
bridged the gap by half, so it's tantalising, because the final sector was where Andy Simpson found it, and he's got a nice late apex for that hairpin there, nice and smooth. That's where the time is, isn't it?
It is. He needs to move it back over to the left, which he does for the optimal line through bridge. And let's have a look at sector 2 split now.
Oh, he's lost it all.
He's miles away. So
miles away, and he's backed out of it. He saw that sector time. He's like, well, and he knows that Lewis Wedding is not on a lap. Johnny's probably the only one who can unseat Lewis Wedding, but I don't think he's anywhere near close enough. And indeed, he's not. Foley has gone off the track there, so I fear that he may well have a track cut for that. We'll wait till he goes through the first sector split line to see whether a time comes up for a Brenton Foley on that lap. It does, so
he's lost it. He's lost it.
He's well off his
PB. Off the chicane, he's lost it.
Philip Oak is not on a lap. Brock Harvey's not on a lap. Brock Harvey, incidentally, in 7th, so that's much better than he did in the first qualifying session. Cameron is up by 4/10, so he's probably the man to watch, because where is he now? He could potentially jump 3 or even 4 spots by given that sort of margin. So we'll wait to see if he sort of retains that across the line. What has he got for us? What has Cameron got? Can he jump? He's
that's a big
jumped
jump.
A lot of positions, 5 spots even.
He found a lot of time in that last sector.
He really did.
3.5 tenths. He was looking to surpass just Dunton Harvey, but he's leapfrogged all the way to the second row, and he'll share that with Lewis Wedding.
He certainly will.
That's a very good time.
Andy Simpson, incidentally, has got pole sewn up, but he had another go. He was still on a lap, and he was 2 tenths off. 0.23 incidentally, and the margin to Hobson was 0.25, so he's done 2 laps there, which were good enough for pole position. So Andy Simpson, geez, you think that he's going to run for the hills when the race starts, and
genuinely staggering.
Genuinely staggering. Well, I think this could be a really interesting race, because if Andy Simpson gets off to a good start and starts to build a gap, he may well find himself under pressure later on in the race if he doesn't think about his tyres. So this is a tantalising prospect.
Well, it certainly is, Des, because we saw how much of a good launch he had from the front row on race number 1, but he couldn't do anything with it by the time they got down to Maggots. And if he can get that sort of launch again, you would think that he'll try and open up a margin, and rather quickly.
Well, we'll find out on the other side of this break, and we'll be right back with all the action from race 2. Don't go anywhere.
A lot of people go through life doing things badly. Racing's important to men who do it well. When you're racing, it's life. Anything that happens before or after, just waiting.
It's lights out and away we go. It's a great start from Sebastian Vettel. Wink up the inside. They run, but the Red Bull Racing man has got through. The champion's done the job. They're all gone. They're all gone. Tander's off. McLaughlin's off. Make room. Richard Petty and Dale Earnhardt. There's another 7-time champ. Jimmy Johnson wins his 7th NASCAR Sprint Cup championship.
Welcome back. Sorry about the pause in the broadcast. A little bit of an Austin Powers situation, but we're back. We're about 5 minutes away from the beginning of race 2. And if race 1 is anything to go by, it should be an absolute ripper.
Well, I think we're both rubbing our hands together with the prospect of the top 3 having an absolute scrap like they did in that last race, aren't we, Stairs? I think we kind of expect it now, given that it's the same top 3 that have qualified where they have, just in a little bit of a different order compared to last race. But the battle they gave us for more than half that first race is mouth-watering for this one.
Well, it certainly is, and the injection of new blood always breathes a bit of new life into the series, and certainly Andy Simpson has provided one hell of an injection of new blood. A new warm-up session, as we made mention of in the first race. We had quite a few cars taken to the track, but just Cracker on track right now in this session, so everyone else just content to have a bit of a break from driving before they launch into another 18 laps of this circuit.
Well, saying that, here comes, looks like here comes Rob Dunt down the pit lane. Yes, it is.
Well, Rob Dunt didn't have too much driving to do in the previous race, so he'll be eager to have a better race this time out.
Yeah, he's about where he qualified in the first race as well. He's starting out of 9th position for the next race, and there's Cam Rutledge coming out as well. He actually went a lap down very early in that race, Cam, so he'll be looking to get a little bit better result this time around. Now they're starting to filter out of the pit lane a bit more.
They are, so that's
drabs.
Pretty much exactly the amount of time for them all to go to the toilet, so the human element coming out in our competitors. As you mentioned, Rob Dunt out on track, looking to improve. Cracker went into the wall before, so he's gone back to the garage. Brendan Ross with a similar livery to Rob Dunt, albeit very different colours.
We've seen this a little bit, haven't we, Stairs? I mean, sometimes we get, in a 2-race situation, we'll get a bunch of drivers come out for the warm-up in race number 1, and then it'll settle down and be a lot quieter in race number 2, because, I mean, most of the guys have had race 1, they've gotten it out the way, they've had qualifying 2, and then they can't sort of just be bothered to have just want to have a bit of a break for a couple of minutes before they launch into the second race.
Absolutely, and yeah, it makes perfect sense. Sometimes they may not have got all the practice they would have desired in the practice session, so they use the first warm-up session as a bit of an opportunity. But the second time, they've got probably all the practice they can handle, and it's just more about getting the mind right for this race.
It is, and one thing I just noticed, just watching from the pit lane, is Brenton Hobson did a couple of practice starts on his exit of the pit lane. He did one at pit lane exit, and he did another one a bit further down. So I'm wondering whether or not he's thinking a little bit further ahead and thinking, well, the start's very, very important here.
Well, he's one place up from where he was in the first qualifying session. A bit stiff, really, to have that kind of improvement and not get pole position, but it's the way it is. Andy Simpson improved more than Brenton Hobson did. And Lewis Wedding with the biggest pill to swallow after the high of winning the race has to start from the second row. Although some of these guys, having said that, would kill to start on the second row.
Yeah, they're absolutely right. I mean, we see all these guys towards the top end of the standings, and we go, you know what, the first couple of rows are going to be occupied, but you look at the likes of like Johnny and Cameron and Brenton Foley, who are starting inside the top 6 or in the top 3 rows, and it's one hell of an achievement to be up in that position, because even if the faster guys kick on rather quickly, it will leave some of the guys that have had a really good qualifying session in a bit of clean air to sort of run their own race and not run the risk of being tangled up in the mid-pack.
Well, it's interesting. Brenton Foley was down a little bit further than he's used to, but he seems to be developing a reputation, especially in the Porsche series, of consistent running. And I mean, I mentioned it I think prior to race 1 that he found himself in a bit of clear air in a number of the previous races, and it happened again in the race 1 tonight. He was up there, he was up there ahead of Brenton Hobson at one stage, in the end finishing 4th, but Johnny had a go and he fell off the back, and he had about 7 or 8 seconds in front and behind of him.
We've got 30 seconds left in this warm-up session, and we've seen only about a half a dozen or so cars come out onto the track, and a handful of people doing the practice starts. And actually, who's that out on track at the moment setting the timing screens? Well, that's Brendan Ross, but there's hardly been any times laid down that are worthwhile mentioning.
Yeah, not indicative. The fastest time there are 24 flat, so that's I don't think that would have even been fast enough to get you off the back row of the grid.
No, and Andy Simpson doing a practice start there as well, so even he thinks that doing a little practice start, it's worth the investment in this warm-up session.
Well, he might have seen Hobbo do the same and thought, well, even though I had a good start in the first race, it's not one to rest on his laurels.
And with practice obviously makes perfect, and if you don't practice and you don't hone and refine your art, then you ultimately can get left behind. I mean, they call it the 6 Ps. It's perfect preparation prevents piss poor for performance. That's what it stands for. And
like a bit of alliteration.
Some of the guys opting to get their practice in for that, so they don't have a bad performance.
Well, yes. I can't think of a witty response to that, and I won't try. But we're nonetheless going to begin gridding up very, very shortly indeed. Seeing these tracking cameras that we saw in Sebring, they're here for Silverstone. This is an old R-Factor conversion, I believe, this circuit. And there's the R-Factor logos to just prove my point, as some of the cars still in the garage, but gradually making their way out onto the circuit. There's a nice view that we'll be seeing for the start. The right-hand side seems to be the popular side of the grid. The top 4 rows, only the guys on the right-hand side on the grid so far. Or Cameron has just joined to start populating the left-hand side of the grid. Oh, he's gone back. Got to make sure you got the right fuel on board. Make sure you got new tyres. And there they are. And looks like we're about to get started. And there goes the leader onto the. Oh, and Johnny's spun round. Johnny's spun around. He'll be able to retake his position, but that's a bit embarrassing for Johnny. And Nether, do you want to take us through the grid?
Well, let's do it. So, then we were talking about Andy Simpson with that stunning qualifying lap time, and 2 laps that were good enough for pole. Starts from the front, and joining him is Brenton Hobson, and looking to make amends for that unfortunate mishap on the final lap when he was battling the man who starts 3rd, Lewis Wedding. So the top 3 in a different order, and the battle will resume. Johnny, despite his spin off the start line for the formation lap, will start 4th. He's just going to retake his place. Cameron had a good qualifying session, moved up to 5th in a very, very late movement, actually gained 4 places in that move. Brenton Foley had a good solid drive to 4th in the first race. He's starting 2 positions further back in 6th for this second race. Philip Boak occupies the outside of row 4 in 7th, and Brock Harvey had a bit better qualifying that time around. He'll start 8th. Thank you, Brock, flashing the lights. And yes, we know you guys have bladders.
Good luck.
Rob Dunt starts 9th, and that's about where he started the last race. And Will Devenish recovering from a 15th place finish in race number 1, and he needs to improve his point situation to keep his hopes alive of a 3rd place finish in the championship. Dwayne Davies starts 11th with Scruff, or aka Matt Williams. In 12th, Brendan Ross will start in 13th, alongside Cracker in 14th. And the back, or not the complete back row, but we've got Gary Neville starting 15th, Cam Rutley starting 16th, and Matt Devine starting 17th. He came back into the server a little bit late, so he's the last runner.
Did he set a time? Because he is generally quicker than that, Matt Devine.
Yeah, no, he didn't set a time. He was out of the server at the time that qualifying was running and came back in during the warm-up.
So he's one to look out for in the early laps of this race, because we know that he's pretty quick, and he was up there well up in the top 10 as the Back row is just gridding up as we speak, and the lights will get us away very, very shortly indeed. Race number 2. The revs are rising. This is the penultimate round of the AMS Oz Super Series. We're going to miss it when it's gone. I'm building up, and I'm waiting for the lights, and they're making me wait. Here we go. We got the lights to get us away for race 2. What can race 2 bring us? Is it a tardy start or is it a good start? We wait till the camera angle switches, and Andy is very, very good. Brenton Hobson has not lost a position, so it's probably good from his point of view. I don't think Lewis Wedding is close enough, but Johnny's got a bit of a look down at Lewis Wedding, and look at the gap already that Andy Simpson has, and Brenton Hobson in second place. What can he do in response?
Well, certainly a very, very even start between the top 2 runners at the start of the race. Very well behaved up and down the field. No real major exchanges of
Foley's lost out to Philip Boak. Sorry to cut across you. That's probably one of the biggest changes.
Yeah, there's only a couple of minor changes, and that was one of them. And the rest of them seem to be either going defensive or maintaining the position they were in. But actually, Will Devenish is challenging Brock Harvey very, very early already, and he wants to get his championship charge back on track, but he's not going to do it like that.
Yeah, he needs to make up. He needs Johnny actually to have a bad race, really, and then capitalise by getting a decent handful of points. But you know, he's going about it the right way early on, making up.
Boak around the outside of Foley too, Stairs at the turn number 10. So that was a very good move by Boak. He had actually a very, very good start in race number 1, and he had another good start in race 2. But he's rounded up Brenton Foley quite quickly as well. Well,
he was already ahead of him off the start, but potentially Brenton Foley went for a move and it didn't work out, and Philip Boak hanging it around the outside. They'll live to fight for another day, but no other changes of position by the looks of it. We go down the order. Rob Dunt went up 1 place and Brock Harvey lost that place. Will Devenish.
That just happened there as Harvey went wide.
Matt Devine, sorry, Matt Devine's gone up 6 places off the start, so I told you everyone at the beginning that he was one to watch, and he has not proven me wrong at all.
No, certainly not. He was the biggest mover on race number 1 as well. He made 7 positions from where he started, and well, he's already very, very close to the same mark. And who's the next man up for Matt Devine? It's Will Devenish and Brock Harvey are the 2 guys that he's hunting down, and he's got a second to make up, but we think he'll probably make that up very quickly with the way that those guys ahead of him are squabbling already.
Absolutely right. Well, Andy Simpson has a 1.5 second lead already at the start, so this race already developing very differently to the first race, and Johnny is all over the back of Lewis Wedding, so Lewis Wedding does not seem to have an answer pace-wise to the leading 2 at this early stage, and is finding himself under pressure already.
Yeah, well, and also Cameron hanging on to Johnny as best he can as well, trying to go with Wedding and Johnny. One thing that we did, Lewis Wedding did mention about our race leader Andy Simpson, is that he was a little bit particularly hard on his tyres, so maybe has he gone too hard too early, but we will only find out when the race wears on a little bit more. Well,
we will, and I had to exhale with impressment. Sorry, that's not a word, but a 20.8 was what Andy Simpson did on his second lap of this race, and that's 3/10 quicker than any of them managed in the first race, and that was a full what's that? 6/10 faster than
6/10
than what Brenton Hobson did. So my goodness, that's what I predicted. What I predict next is that his tyres are going to fall off later in the race, and will Hobson be able to manage his car well enough to close that gap up and indeed make the position back, or will Andy Simpson break his spirit?
Well, that's going to be the key to this, isn't it, Stairs? How you manage the car, because that gap is going up at a rather quick rate of knots from first to second, and it'll be about management of tyres and management of the driving style to try and maintain that as the race wears on. And coming back to our old friend, the track cuts, Johnny and Cameron both actually got penalised that last lap around. So again, we watch with interest to see how that goes.
20.7. He's done another one. He's banged out another lap, which, well, I mean, Brenton Hobson improved, but he was at 21.3 the last time around. Another 6/10 he's eaten out of Brenton Hobson, so that is some pace at the front.
And all you can do is just watch and just be impressed by how quickly this young man's gotten up to speed and how he's laying down this impressive challenge. And also we hope, we're not going to put the moz on him, but we hope it's with a full fuel load as well, because these are times that we would have been seeing in qualifying from some of the pursuing pack. But to do it on full fuel is mightily impressive.
Well, he just gave up a 10th in the first sector to Brenton Hobson. And we watched. I'm going to watch those sector times with eagle eyes, because the point that we're interested in this race is the threshold where those times start coming back towards Brenton Hobson. I don't think that's a matter of if; it's a matter of when. And the earlier that happens in the race, the better for Brenton Hobson. Andy Simpson just sort of pegged the gap back. I think he's actually started to grow it back in the final 2 sectors. Or he was a sector, 27 flat in the final sector. So he's back in the 21s, and Hobson did his fastest lap of the race for a 20.9. So keep watching this space.
Yeah, certainly. So Hobson gained a little bit of time on that lap, but not very much, only a 10th. Wedding actually lost a little bit of time to Hobson again as well, but obviously he's got Johnny for company at the moment. Cameron not very far behind either. So everyone driving a little bit of a different race at this early stage. I mean, early stages of race number 1, the field was very, very close at the front, and we were already starting to rub our hands together, but it's a bit of a different beast this time around. In actual fact, there's not too many battles going on down the field at the moment. It's very much line astern, and no one really challenging anybody else. As we say that, Matt Devine closes up really, really quickly on Devenish and Harvey through the hairpin, and he's eyeing off his next opportunity to pluck off another position or 2.
That's right. So well, we're looking at the sector times with an eagle eye, and they've matched each other almost 10th for 10th. Again this lap, Andy Simpson marginally slower in the second sector, and Brenton Hobson marginally faster in the first sector. So Andy Simpson marginally faster in the first sector. So it's all swings and roundabouts right now. They both set a 21 flat in on that occasion. Andy Simpson just half a 10th slower.
Matt Devine's definitely got pace back here, battling with Devenish and Harvey Stairs, and in actual fact, he completely ignored the riding on the back of that Brock Harvey Porsche that just stopped hitting me, because he gave him a couple of love taps on the sector 3 of that last lap around. So he's definitely looking for an opportunity to get by. He's definitely, we can visually see it, he's got the pace, but he just can't do anything with making an overtaking move happen here, but he's trying everything.
There's no way through there, but he thought there was, and all over the back of Brock Harvey.
Well,
Brock Harvey's going to defend.
Coming up here.
Yeah, that hairpin that Lewis Wedding we mentioned taking a very shallow line into, and Brock Harvey's got a work to do to make the apex, and he's allowed Matt Devine up alongside him, but he's just got his nose in front enough that he'll be able to sweep through into bridge at full speed, and it would be a brave Matt Devine to stick his nose up in there. He thought about it. He thought he'd distract Matt. Oh, he's going to dive. He sent it. He sent it. Brock Harvey has... he's seen him coming, and thankfully he's got the position done. Take 2 to tango around here. Brock Harvey, ever the gentleman, has not closed the door. He probably would have pit manoeuvred himself if he did.
Yeah, certainly, that's exactly right. Matt Devine, that's where he had to go the last lap around, where they made a little bit of contact. So Brock was probably very, very aware that he was probably going to have another go if he was close enough again. And Brock just had a little bit of common sense there, and the door was open and he didn't turn down on him. So let him through quite comfortably, and Matt's up 7 places again in this particular race. It was the same as last race, and he's got another opportunity to gain position. But Devenish just skipped away a little bit here, so Matt will have to use all that speed to try and close up, and Brock going with him. So maybe Brock trying to capitalise. If Matt can get past, he'll think, well, I can get past too.
Yes, another battle that we were following earlier on was Lewis Wedding and Johnny. Johnny seems to have fallen off the back, and it's a bit of a trend with Johnny. I think he works his tyres a little bit harder early in the race, and as a result he suffers later on, although we're only 7 laps into this race. But he's falling into the clutches of Cameron at the moment, and the guys behind are not that far off, so it just takes one mistake, you're going to lose a lot of positions.
Yes, and speaking of battles, the exchange between Simpson and Hobson has just stabilised a little bit at the moment at around 2 and a bit seconds. It's not going up and not going down in great clumps, so maybe Andy's probably had a bit of a thought, and he's doing consistently 21s at the moment, so now he's probably looking more along the lines of, I need to just get myself into a rhythm here. I've built up a gap and now I need to maintain it.
Well, Hobson taken 2 tenths out of him in the previous lap, but he's just had quite a scruffy lap by his standards. It was a 21.5, so I think that he's made a mistake on that lap, and he needs to be perfect from here on in to get the win, and hope that Simpson has worked his tyres too hard.
Yeah, he definitely needs to, and Lewis Wedding, in order to catch back up, he'll be preying on Brenton Hobson to close in and have a bit of a battle with Andy Simpson out in front, and allow Wedding to come back up and close up and make it a three-way battle, much like we had in the last race. You can visually see the cars ahead of him, but he is losing time, Lewis. He's gone out from about 2.3 to 2.8 seconds to Hobson in the last couple of laps, so he really needs a good couple of laps and a bit of a battle out in front to slow that pace down.
Well, I think Simpson is having a rough lap by his standards. Hobbo had closed into 1.5 seconds, but it's just, it's ebbing, and obviously it ebbs and flows as they get to different parts of the circuit, and the concertina effect makes its mark. But I think Andy Simpson, well, he was 2 tenths slower, and Brenton Hobson set a purple sector in the second sector, and that gap as they come across the line is 1.7, so Brenton Hobson just closing that back in. He's back into the 20s, and that's his best lap of the race, a 20.7, and Andy Simpson did a 21.2, so that's the biggest discrepancy we've seen in Brenton Hobson's favour.
Yeah, so it's starting to come back to Hobson. Matt Devine has caught Will Devenish rather quickly, Stairs, and Brock Harvey's actually done quite well to hang on to the back of Matt Devine here as well and return this to a 3-car train. Could very well become a 4-car train if these guys manage to catch Rob Dunt ahead of them, who's plodding along rather nicely, but they're taking a little bit of time. Devine's had a dive at Devenish down at Maggots, and he won't be able to make that stick. They can't go side by side.
Oh, door to door, that would have been a track cut.
They've somehow managed to go side by side through the chicane. I don't know how that's managed to happen, but this is not over as they bit of push and shove on the way to the hairpin.
Hobson's made a big error somewhere. He's back to the gap went out to 3 seconds briefly. It's now 2.7, but after just sort of closing that gap in slightly, he's given a lot of it up somewhere.
Yeah, he has dropped away, hasn't he, rather quickly, so he's going to have all that hard work to do all over again.
And to compound that, Simpson's just set the fastest middle sector of the race.
Well, that's a sector where he was doing quite well through qualifying too. Devine has another dive at Devenish, a bit of a bump and run, but I think Devine's makes a bit more sensible out of this, and he exceeds the position back to Devenish, but yes, he's not done. This is allowing an interesting battle to the flag, and Devenish doesn't need this.
It's not for points. It's because they're in different classes, and it's bringing Brock Harvey back into it.
Yeah, but he doesn't need the guys having a bit of a hitting contest between each other and getting turned around, because Johnny's ahead of him, and the further ahead Johnny is, the more points he's potentially going to take away from Will and make it more difficult for him at the next round, and the final round of the series.
Kind of on his lonesome.
There is a big cross stairs. There was a bit of a Will managed to hang on to it very, very well, but that was a rough hit from Matt.
It was. I just looked at the timing screens briefly, and I just saw the end of the contact. But Will Devenish looks like he did a stellar job to hang on to that one. But I just wanted to make mention of Rob Dunt, who's sort of he's got away with these guys fighting each other so hard. You can see him just in the background of that shot, the blue car driving off towards the sunset, as we got Scruff going wide there, and Dwayne Davies looking like he's having a bit of a look, but. Rob Dunt is actually leading the Pro-Am race at the moment, so that is something that the reason that Devine would be fighting so hard is to get up there and catch up to Rob Dunt, and he's second in class at the moment. But the fact that he's got Devenish in between himself and Rob Dunt is the bone of contention that is causing him to fight so hard.
Absolutely, and speaking of interclass battles, Foley's gotten back past Boak in terms of the Pro B battle as well, Stairs, so they've got back to their original starting positions and still continuing to squabble, and they're closing in on Cameron as well, so I believe Cameron is Pro B as well, isn't he?
Actually, beg your pardon, actually Cameron is currently Pro-Am, so I think I've led everyone astray, but So yes, he's actually the leader of Pro-Am, and that means that Rob Dunt is second in class. So I don't make prophecies. I don't make mistakes. I make prophecies that immediately turn out to be wrong, as Murray Walker said. But if we rejoin our battle for the lead, Brenton Hobson, he's still hovering around about. Well, he's brought it back to 2 seconds. So he seems to be getting to an invisible wall whenever he gets near that. And last time around, he was 1/10 of a second slower than Andy Simpson. So I think Andy's managing this race really well at the moment.
He's doing a good job out in front. Devine has just gotten past Devenish through the hairpin as well, Stairs, and he's maintained that through the rest of Sector 2. And I think Will just probably needs to let, as you said before, this is not for points, just needs to let Devine go and then just run his own race, because hopefully if he hangs on to Matt, he can get past Rob Dunt up ahead, and it'll be still a good result, but Johnny's still ahead of him. In actual fact, actually Johnny's DNF'd, sorry, Stairs.
Oh my goodness, he is.
I muck up my words, so...
How long ago did that happen? We'll see if we can find a replay of...
Looking at the timing screens, it was on lap 10, so just a lap and a bit ago.
Well, we might not...
100% sure what's happened.
I'll
have a look for you and I'll come back to you.
Yeah, we may not be able to see the replay of that, but we'll wait to see whether you can find that. But we're going to just run you through the order, because Andy Simpson seems to lead quite comfortably at the moment. Brenton Hobson's not making any real impression of him on his lead, rather, at the head of the pack. It's about 2 seconds, and Lewis Wedding is 3 seconds behind Brenton Hobson. Cameron there is coming under pressure there from Brenton Foley, and his pit maneuver there gone into a bit of a spin, and Philip Boak has gone and taken 2 positions, 2-for-1 deal, as you would say. But we just caught the end of that. We're just going to catch a replay if we can, and let's see whose fault was that. I have the worst feeling that it may well be. It's difficult. He was up alongside, and Cameron, did he turn down on him? We find here's Foley. We're going to go with his onboard. Maybe a bit of an ambitious move. I think that one may well be on Foley, because Cameron gave him the room, and it's ended poorly for both of them. And Philip Boak now with 2 positions, and Brenton Foley down there in 7th, and he's rejoined the battle with Will Devenish. Rob Dunt has dropped behind Will Devenish in this. So, excuse me, I don't know if that was as a result of trying to avoid the spun cars of Brenton Foley and Cameron, who's retained 5th place, but Philip Boak is thanking his lucky stars at this stage.
Yes, and Devine's capitalised on that the Foley incident as well, because he's managed to move up to 6, so that's an 11-place gain from the rear of the field, and he's actually...
Oh, we got a bit of server lag there.
Here.
Yeah.
I was unable to find what happened to Johnny, but just having a look at his sector times and what's happened in the server chat, I believe that may possibly be a disconnection issue, because he's gone, something's happened to him in Sector 2, and it looks like he's a very sudden exit of the game, so I've got a funny feeling that's probably an internet disconnection drama.
Well, this is going to be very hard if the drivers are seeing the same thing that we're seeing, because it's very, very stuttery at the moment, with the cars disappearing off the track and reappearing, and it seems to be happening all across the board. So we're at 14 laps of 18 done, so if this doesn't recover and the race has to be red flagged, it may well be that we stop short of the full distance if this continues and causes the drivers to go off the track.
Yeah, it's not looking good, is it, Stairs? I'm not sure if we've had an incident with this before where we've had to call a race. The only one we've had to call on a countback was the GT3 race at Magny Cool because of the safety car drama.
Yeah, we had the similar issues in Winton, but we restarted the race from the start because it happened so early on in the race. But it doesn't look like it's getting any better, and it's not. I really hope the drivers can see more than we can, because it is very, very distracting.
It certainly is, and actually Rob Dunt's in the pits as well, Stairs, so I'm not sure if he's decided to pit as a result of what's been going on or if it's a result of damage, but he's got the car up on the jack, so it's definitely having tyres replaced, so I dare say that's an unscheduled stop for some reason or another. In actual fact, Stairs, I think the timing screens are a little bit, might be a little bit strange too, because a number of drivers are showing 1 lap down, so Brenton Foley on my timing screen is showing one lap down.
Oh, it's
and he's
completely
in seventh
stopped now.
place, so yes, I think this race might be called. I think very, very shortly.
Yeah, which I think it was probably the end of lap 13 was probably before the race reached its. Or before this started happening. Oh, it seems to have recovered a bit. I guess what happens now is everyone tries to continue. Brenton Hobson has fallen. Well, it's the timing screens are all over the place because the gap is showing Brenton Hobson 2 seconds off Simpson, but it's showing him in third place behind Wedding, who's 6 seconds behind Simpson. So, and visually there, he's well ahead of Lewis Wedding, so that gap is still similar to before the issue started. But it's disappointing because it sort of robs us of the end of this race. We had a fantastic midfield battle developing. We had the intrigue of whether Simpson could keep his tyres alive to the end of the race, and it's just sort of we're not getting that, unfortunately.
No, unfortunately not. And look, it's starting to getting a little bit better in small sections, but unfortunately not to a standard that's unfortunate. That's good enough for our viewers and good enough for us actually either.
Yes. Yeah, well, it's at the moment they're showing Cracker as the last man on the lead lap. Dwayne Davies, DNF.
Yeah. I'm having a look at the timing screen, Stairs, and we've only got the 2 retirements, but you're right. Andy Simpson, Brenton Hobson have all got themselves on the timing screens, first and second on the road. Although there's a few other little issues, like Lewis Wedding is going up and down the charts quite chronically at the moment. So I think
it's got Boak in third.
Yeah, it's got Boak in third, which is definitely not correct because Hobson is second on the road, and we know Wedding was third on the road. We have had a few timing dramas over the course of the AMS Oz, but this is or across all series. But this is something that unfortunately happens from time to time when have a few tracks that are a little bit strange.
Well, if it was to end this way, obviously Andy Simpson having led from start to, I want to say finish, but we haven't got to the finish yet, but he's led every lap of this race and is the deserving winner if it is called at 14 laps or 13 laps, whatever we got to. Brenton Hobson second. We really haven't seen many changes of position in the top positions like we did in the first race.
Yeah, we haven't, and I've lost most of my visual on this at the moment, Stairs, so I dare say that something really, really unfortunate has occurred. I'm not sure if, well, now I've got cars returned, and Andy Simpson in third, and now 8th place, so yeah, this is, it's unworkable for us, isn't it?
Yeah. The only question from my point of view is whether the drivers are seeing the same thing that we're seeing. I think Brenton Hobson is obviously just continuing and seeing what he can do. It's almost to the point where you would have expected people to crash if they were seeing the same things that we were seeing, because the server has sort of stopped for up to 30 seconds at a time for me in terms of my visual. So if they're seeing the same thing, well, I'd be surprised if they're seeing the same thing, because they still seem to be circulating. And
it seems to have settled down a bit now, so it looks a lot better, but we'll obviously have to wait.
Simpson's in 11th place.
Yeah, we'll have to wait a lap or two to see it shake out.
On track, Simpson is coming around the final corner at the moment.
There we go.
And yeah, he's still
second.
Looking at the over. There we go. It's put him back at the lead.
Out.
So that was a timing glitch. He didn't actually lose that position. Yeah. And that gap, interestingly, has remained at the same. I think actually this was an issue that the drivers weren't seeing, because they were continuing as though nothing was wrong. So
yes,
he's got Gary Neville to deal with, but he's on the final lap of the race, so he shouldn't have too much trouble getting through. He's a 2.7 second lead, and he's dealt with that masterfully through the race. That gap has held around about that sort of margin for almost the entire race.
Yeah, he's done very, very well. He pushed hard, and we worried that he was going to continue to push and abuse those tyres, and then it'll come back to Hobson later on. But no, he's done an extremely good job to get to an advantage that he felt comfortable with and maintain that gap for the whole entire race. He's only got 2 corners to go now.
Yes, and take nothing away from Andy Simpson because and Hobson he has made a mistake. He's blown his engine up on the last lap of the race. He's not gonna. Oh, this is painful. He can't even clutch it to the end there. He's gonna lose out to Lewis Wedding. Oh, so close.
How did he do that? That's a very, very unusual mistake from Hobson.
Well, that's your winner, Andy Simpson, celebrating like he should. Brenton Hobson obviously was pushing very hard. Very fortunate second place for Lewis Wedding. Brenton Hobson, he's still rolling, and this is like a Corey situation. He's not going to get the podium because Philip Boak has gone through. Cameron has gone through to take fourth. Brenton Hobson, he's pulling off to the grass now because he's realised that the finish line.
Behind Devenish and Foley, so this is good for not so much for Devine but also for Devenish, because with Johnny not finishing, Devenish will go back ahead of Johnny as the third place in the standings. But it also, with Wedding finishing in second, we'll have to wait to see how that shakes out. But I think Wedding is going to retain, actually probably sew up second in the championship.
I think he will, because he had to. Well, certainly over Johnny. He had to outscore Johnny by 4 points, and I think he certainly has done that. Johnny didn't finish. Although you will still get points for a DNF, we reiterate that. But Hobson, he was he on track ahead of Gary Neville, or is Gary Neville still circulating? No, so
Gary Neville is finished.
He's 12th, so he will retain 11th place. So
yeah, so he is, because I think Gary Neville was a lap down because he was between Hobson and Simpson as they came around the last few corners. So Gary Neville was a lap down, so Hobson will retain 11th.
Well, we thought he'd given up. He clearly hadn't, because he was pushing that car to the... I don't think I've seen anyone blow up a Porsche engine in ever.
It's extremely rare, isn't it? We've seen it a couple of times in some of the other series, where, especially at the Formula 3 last weekend, where it was blow up City Central for at Laguna Seca. But very, very rare to see a Porsche engine expire. And, well, the man himself has decided to pop into the box. And we probably need to get the lowdown a bit from you here, Brenton. But on the last lap, smoke and flame from the back of the car. And let us know what happened. We're all a bit scratching our heads here.
Oh, I'm not the only one then. I'm really not sure. I've never seen a Porsche blow up before, but... I don't know if it was something server related, because I could see the leader had also blown up on my screen in front of me. So I don't know what was going on, whether or not that was a server thing or what happened. But I thought I was having internet dramas. Of course, it looks like it was just a server related problem. Everyone was having problems. But I don't know what happened. I just went into the corner there and it blew up. So not sure. Tried to roll it to the line, but because of the slow corner that I was in at the time, I didn't have enough speed. So disappointing, but... at least I don't have to worry about the points in that race, so that's the main thing, I guess.
Yeah, well, I mean, from our perspective, we saw some significant dramas from lap 14 onwards, and it only recovered about the last lap. We were seeing a lot of server lag, and we weren't sure if you guys were seeing it as well. So, from your end, was everything normal during those last 5 laps, or was there some lag happening?
No, it was definitely lag. The leader was, I think it was even more than 5 laps. The leader was just disappearing and reappearing, and my relative was going all over the place. I actually completely missed turn 3 and 4, or whatever it is there, just about 1 lap, and lost nearly a full second because the leader flashed out up in front of me and it distracted me. And that's a rookie thing, but it shouldn't have done that, but it did. It distracted me and I completely missed it. And, it was very distracting, but I thought it was my internet. I didn't realise everyone was having the same problem. But
oh, yes, well. So if you see the broadcast, we were scratching our heads a lot because it was going all over the place. The timing screens were going haywire, and the visuals were disappearing as well. So I guess it's reassuring to know it wasn't just us. But I mean, I'd have to say kudos to everyone on track for keeping it on track, given that was happening.
Yeah, it's just an extra challenge that we don't normally have to face, but it is what it is. It shouldn't affect you. You should be able to just keep doing what you're doing, but. I was trying to figure out what was going on while I was driving and recording and commentating, and it sort of all got a bit on top of me there for a bit, and made a few mistakes. But yeah, I felt like we had the speed there to run at the front. Just lost the time at the start of the race on cold tyres and never get it back. And you know, the blow up at the end is massively frustrating, but that's just the way it goes.
Well, we saw the pace ramped up significantly in that qualifying session. I think both the laps, or the lap that you set and the lap that Andy set, would have got pole in the first race. Were you surprised with the pace that Andy pulled out?
Not really. I felt like he was quicker than both Lewis and myself in the first race. He just got bottled up behind, and it's very hard to pass. So burnt off his tyres, and I sort of caught the pair of them in the first race and just got a bit lucky. But I thought if he got to the front, he'd probably pull away. But I was actually a little surprised that I managed to match him there, actually, towards the I don't know, the last 10 or so laps. I sort of matched him and started to pull him back in even a little at times. But once the server issue started cropping up, I started making mistakes and threw it all away every time I made a gain.
Yeah, well, we were watching that with interest because we thought maybe Andy would be burning through his tyres pretty quickly. Was that what you were hoping for?
Yeah, I was definitely hoping for it, but I was pushing it at about 110% all through that race, and I knew that I was going to burn my own off, so I was definitely struggling with the same issue. I just hoped that maybe he struggled with it worse.
Well, he's not here with us, but we wish Andy all the best, or all the congratulations for his debut win in the AMS Oz series. Lewis, you had a bit of a quiet race. You weren't able to match the same sort of performance you had in the first race because of your qualifying session wasn't quite there with the top two. But you inherited second at the end with Brenton's engine failure right on the line.
Yeah. I sort of suspected that was sort of how I thought the first race would pan out if I let both Hobbo and obviously Andy go past. That's why I was really strong, obviously, in the first race to not let him go because I knew I didn't quite have the speed. And then, yeah, obviously Hobbo was a little bit faster than what I was, and then Andy was just a little bit faster than Hobbo, so I was sort of strung out a little bit over time. And then obviously it was at that 12, 13 or something, the obviously server started playing up, and my tyres weren't bad, but they weren't good either, so I just sort of backed off a little bit, and then obviously Hobbo at the end obviously blew up, so sort of the only action I had was obviously him blowing his engine. I was like, oh, why is he on the inside of the track at the last turn there? And then obviously Johnny was sort of on my heels for the first couple laps, and then I eked that out a bit, and then yeah, it was pretty lonely. Race pace wise, I mean, I was fast and much more consistent what I was in the first race, that's for sure, but obviously the other two were just a bit faster than me.
Yes, and I guess we saw with Johnny DNF'd in that second race, so I mean, I haven't done the maths completely, but I believe that should have sewn up second for you in the championship.
Oh, it's good to, if that's true, hopefully, obviously I'm happy with second. Obviously missed the first few rounds, so to get second is not too bad. Obviously bit of a shame I missed them and couldn't put up more of a fight to Hobbo, but yeah, second in the first season here, I'll take that definitely with the few wins that I've had.
For sure. And that means that we just have the one round remaining in this Super Series. It's all of a sudden we've got to the business end of the championship, and the next round will be Bathurst. So both to Hobbo and to Lewis, I think you'll be looking forward to that quite a lot, I imagine.
Yeah, Bathurst. In these, obviously, I've driven them in GT3s and supercars over the years. So in a Porsche, I haven't done it yet, aside from when I've tested GT3s there. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. Obviously, at the top of the mountain with the weight distribution will be a bit of fun on some worn tyres.
Absolutely. And Hobbo?
I'll be interested to see how it goes. I think I'm going to be immensely frustrated because I always struggle to go to any version of Bathurst that isn't iRacing, just the accuracy of that version. And I've done so many laps there, and I'm quite good at Bathurst on iRacing. And then as soon as I go anywhere else and it's not the same, I'll massively struggle. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'll do my best.
Let's hope it continues.
Well, another closing thoughts?
Well, closing thoughts with the top two positions. Definitely the top one, but obviously the most likely the second one sewn up in the championship as well. The focus now turns to the third place for overall, and also the Pro B situation as well. There's still a handful of battles raging on to next week or to next round, which I think is in. Not sure if it's next week. It might be 2 weeks away.
Yeah, no, Supercars returns next week, which we've been taking a bit of a break from, and we're all looking forward to.
Yeah, so there's the battle between Devenish and Johnny will still continue, and then you've got Brock Harvey and Matt Williams and co are all still squabbling over some of the minor placings as well. So plenty still up for grabs in 2 weeks' time.
Absolutely. And as I alluded to earlier, we got the Supercars coming back for round 7. That's next Thursday, 21st of June. So that's a series that's been on hiatus for about a month or so, as we've been doing, I think, 3 back-to-back Super Series rounds. In the meantime, we've also got the championship decider for the Formula 3 series with Greg Nangle and Heath Dixon separated by just a handful of points, and Lewis Wedding perhaps a dark horse in that. He'll be maybe challenging his inner Kimi Räikkönen. You'll be calling that one, Nether.
Yeah, certainly will, and thank you very much for filling in for me the previous weekend for Formula 3, but good to see that it's going down to the wire, and 3 guys that have won 2 races or 2 back-to-back races in the first 3 rounds up the pointy end of the scale, and we think it'll come down to between Nangle and Dixon, but wouldn't count Lewis out if the guys ahead have a bit of a bad night, and anything is possible, but definitely looking forward to that one. We're going to be at Albert Park for that one.
Absolutely. Well, you never know what can happen when there's a championship on the line. The nerves may well just cause some surprises, but well, we'll look forward to that one. That's this Sunday, and then the Sunday after that is the GT3s from Spa-Francorchamps. So that is round 7 of that particular championship on the 24th of June. All that and much more coming up very soon. This has been round 10 of the Automobilista Australia Super Series, brought to you by Short Shift Podcast and Apex Rear Wing. I've been Stairs. My partner in commentary has been Nether. Thank you